Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Indra in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, The Thunder Gates. Are you serious? Naruto asked. This was a pretty drastic solution, even for Orochimaru. Entirely. This is madness. I am entirely sane, I assure you. Orochimaru said dryly. There are many people I could convince to join us, even at this very moment. Promise them a safe location, and persuading them becomes easy enough. Anko said nothing, only twitching when she heard safe. Where would we even start? Karen asked. By finding a safe place. Anko said, still pretty quiet. Naruto felt weird seeing her like this. It hadn't been her fault, far from it. They had decided to go, all three of them. Now was not the time to tell her that, though, as she would likely blow up on him. Later, he'd try talking to her. But the camp was safe. Naruto tried. Obviously not to somebody who can just warp in. Orochimaru drawled. That's what happened? What can we even do against that, then? I'm still going over our options. Here's what I figured, Orochimaru mused. First, the man who appeared can't go where he has never been at all. Otherwise, the organization would already have captured the other Jinchuriki long ago. Second thing. Anko said, finally looking at them. He can't become intangible and teleport at the same time. What are you talking about? Teleportation, intangibility. Karen asked. Can you tell us what happened, first? Naruto added. Starting from what Akatsuki is, please. Sakura concluded. They brought her up to speed. In that case. She wondered aloud. What if you guys went somewhere he wouldn't think to look? Somewhere he would have trouble bringing a large number of people, maybe? It would at least buy you time, while you worked on something to prevent him from teleporting in. Anko stared. This might work, yes. Where could we go, though? The elemental nations are only so big. Any good sensor could locate a village by its chakra concentration. Karen said. She would know. The Byakugan, and maybe Nagato's Rinnegan might even make it easier. Orochimaru added. They have a maximal range, though. Don't they? Sakura asked. Yes. But nothing is safe on the continent. And outside of the elemental nations. Sakura continued. There are islands, but nobody lives there, it's simply too far. Anko said. Earth was a large place, and there were a fair amount of islands stranded in the middle of the wide oceans. Orochimaru nodded. There are likely only wild animals there, if that. It could be just big pieces of land, too. And coming back would be at least as difficult as the initial journey to get there. I could get you there and back. I can move people, not just me. Instantaneously. I just have to go to the place to put the mark. Sakura said. Orochimaru and Anko stared. She showed them her portal jutsu. This is fascinating. He murmured. This might just work. And there's no distance limit, then. No, but. She winced. Never mind. It's not workable. I can only make 2 portals in total. So there would only be a single way in and out. And no way for me to make more, or use it otherwise. Karen shook her head. That's too risky. Orochimaru looked at Naruto again. Does your own gauntlet allow for something similar? I don't know. He admitted. Find out, then. I need to locate where our people went. Tell me as soon as you know. Orochimaru left the room. Silence stretched in the room. Anko was back to staring blankly. Look, guys. Sakura said. I'd like to stay, but I still have a contract to fulfill. It's already been long enough. Do you have any other assignment? Karen asked. Sakura shook her head. Just this one. Will you come back? She asked. Sakura hesitated. Please. At least temporarily. Naruto finished. You can decide for yourself if you want to get more involved or not later. We'll be staying here for some days. Sakura sighed. Still as push as ever, huh? Alright. Just for a while, though. After having been on her own for a few years, she was not sure what to think about the idea of joining someone's group for real. She gave them a hesitant smile. It's good to see you. Both. You too. Karen said, smiling brightly. She left one gate opening in their room before leaving. Anko left without saying a word, as well. Naruto looked at Karen. Wanna help me test it out? Sure thing. She adjusted her glasses. You might need the help. Okay, my gauntlet definitely opens no portals. By now, he had tried enough times to say it with complete certainty. Go on. Karen said, taking notes. Try other shapes. I did. Picture a walkway. Done, too. A passage. Yup. It's not based on light, either. Karen nodded, striking through one of the items on her notepad. Trying it out in different types of lighting had been tedious, but progress tended to be. We can get rid of the lamp, then. Naruto said, still shielding his eyes from it. Sure. I don't think it needed to be so powerful. Karen shrugged. Not an exchange of matter, then. Karen nodded. This had been one of her ideas. The apple stood on the desk, intact. So did the rocks they had picked up, closer to Naruto in weight. Let's put this away. And if you try to, recreate yourself in a different place. Anko asked. Recreate. Look, I'm no fucking scientist. She gestured rudely. Making yourself anew. Whatever. Anko left the room. She was probably looking for something to take her mind off what had happened in base camp. A few days later, Sakura came back in casual clothes. Hey, guys. Sakura said, walking out of her gateway. Are you still trying to figure out how this gauntlet works? Yes. Obviously. Why do they even call you Ghost Hand? Did you pick it up for yourself? Ah. Sakura seemed embarrassed. I followed Asuna itinerant puppeteer for a while. That's where I learned how to use chakra to summon an arm, let's say. The name stuck after a while, so I decided to go with it. She demonstrated. It was less an arm than a dozen chakra threads that extended from her stump. I can summon more and it kinda acts like an arm. Longer reach, too. Can't use jutsu with it, though. Sakura said. Ah. That's how you fooled my chakra senses. Naruto sighed. Karen laughed. Anything would fool your chakra senses. Not everybody is stumbling through life blind as a bat. He huffed. Technically, teleportation involves breaking yourself down to the atomic level and reassembling yourself somewhere else. Warping would be more correct. Orochimaru chided. Naruto stared. I'm still going to call it teleportation. He grumbled. Orochimaru sighed. Why didn't he get somebody more science-inclined? Shouting the words doesn't help. Good to know. Karen said. We tried, at least. Naruto squeezed out, his throat raw. How's this lightning armor thing going? Karen asked, looking for a distraction from their endless tries. Naruto shrugged. Pretty badly. Take a look. Lightning shrouded him entirely. Wow. That looks like it's working though, doesn't it? Nah. I can just manage to make a light show. It doesn't make me faster, or more durable. I can only manage to do that by focusing more. So just legs or arms for now. Not at the same time, even. Ah. Too bad. Karen felt some chakra build up in the room. Naruto. Wait. It's the tag. It's reacting. She came to take a closer look. It was shining. This was new. He stopped channeling lightning chakra. The tag faded. Ah, come on. He grumbled. No wait. Keep this lightning thing going. Karen said, bubbling with anxious excitement. Okay. He channeled lightning to cover his body again. The mark lit up again. That's it. That's it. I mean, it's shining, but besides that. Try focusing on it. Which one? There are two in the room. Either. He did. Something built up within him. He focused on the feeling of lightning shielding him, enveloping him. Nothing happened. Some instinct told him to go one step further. He pictured himself becoming thunder. 10 seconds passed, during which he focused on keeping the feeling in mind. The next instant, he was on the other side of the room, with a loud booming sound. Both he and Karen were too surprised to react. They stayed here in silence. Then they started cackling and laughing. Harder and harder. It felt as though a dam had burst, and soon they were rolling on the floor, wiping tears from their eyes. That's how Sakura found them again, coming back from outside. So no matter what, I teleport to the marker I put first. Naruto said. I can remove it, though. I see. Sakura nodded. How do you trigger it? I picture myself becoming lightning for around 10 seconds. Or thunder, whichever is more correct. It's like a relay, then. It's not the same as Sakura's. Not better, not worse. Karen said. Okay. So, no matter to which mark you want to go, you have to go through the first gate. Let's call it the main one. I want to call them Thunder Gates. Naruto said, stubborn. It's mine to name. What did you name yours, Sakura? I didn't name them. How childish of you. Let's see how bloody this child can beat you, then. She snarked. Did you say something? Beat me. He mimicked being hard of hearing. I think I heard you yelp when you had to dodge my great wind arrow. Oh, please, guys. Karen rolled her eyes. Why had she ever thought Sakura was the mature one? She was just as bad. Come back at me when you make your own jutsu, Karen. Naruto put his nose up in the air. Never mind, I'm going to help her beat the shit out of you. So yeah, I can come back and forth from any marks. I still have to go through the main Thunder Gate, so that's the one I need to put in a safe location dash. It's not really suited for battle. It still takes him almost 10 seconds to jump. Sakura interjected, staring at her fingernails innocently. Naruto glared at her. To Thunder Leap. What was that? Karen asked. Thunder Leap is the verb. He said, crossing his arms. This one is too goofy, change it please. She decided. Fuck you. Maybe I will. Thundergate himself? To Thundergate? What about other people? Orochimaru butted in, unwilling to assist to yet another squabble. Hard to believe they were in their late teens. Then again, Jiraiya and him still did the same, even now. I can definitely bring people with me. He nodded. I don't know if there's a way I can get people to use the jutsu. To let them use the gates on their own. Ah. Orochimaru said, thinking fast. I can help you there. This might just work, then. The last time I saw this expression, you played med scientist with my body and brain. Sakura looked at him curiously. What? Karen and Anko just shared a look. Orochimaru shrugged. It had worked. His latest apprentice could be pretty narrow-minded, sometimes. Let's take a few more days with your gauntlet. Orochimaru said. We'll tinker with it and come up with something. Sure thing, sensei. You're still the brains. For now. Naruto nodded, magnanimous. Orochimaru snorted. The brawn as well. Come again when you get your first what? B rank, A rank page in the bingo book. I'm the heart, then. Naruto frowned. That's Karen. Sakura supplied helpfully. Oh, fuck off. Orochimaru sighed. 3 days later, he was hunched over the gauntlet Naruto had lent him, and that he was still sustaining with his chakra. It was going to take them a bit longer than expected, most likely. The way the jutsu worked was something he was not familiar with. He started to draw a rough model of what could understand. Anko unfolded a world map on the table. She had come back after 2 days away. Do you see this? She asked, looking more like her normal self. Karen squinted her eyes. Anko was pointing at the middle of the sea. There's nothing. Exactly what it looks like, right? She said, smugly. Except there should be islands there. Supposedly. Sensei confirmed, at least. Where exactly? Naruto asked. Anko hesitated. Somewhere in a circle of a diameter of around 100 kilometers. Naruto blinked. Okay. Anko grumbled. Look, if we can't find it on any map, then this Toby guy won't either. Karen nodded. True. But I picked it at random. She said, as if this were a good thing. It's completely out of range of anything. Naruto had a bad feeling. How far is it, and how do we get there? Anko looked sheepish. Well. With a boat. It's something like 10,000 kilometers, I guess. Somebody gasped. You were planning to send us sailing there? No, of course not. Well. Not the whole way, at least. Just put one of your fancy teleport marks on a boat and let's let it drift. I can't put my mark on something that moves that much. And there's no way a bot is going to drift thousands of kilometers in the right direction. Naruto frowned. They had tried to find out the limitations. Sakura shook her head. Me neither. Ugh. Anko winced. She tried to look upbeat. So. Anybody wants to go sailing across the world? Orochimaru looked thoughtful. The idea could work. But you'll need to hire somebody to get you there, and this could be a loose link. Unless you kill the man after you're done, of course. He shrugged. Naruto frowned. We're not doing that. I assumed you would refuse, yes. Orochimaru said dryly. Do you know how to maintain a boat? Nope. Have you ever been out at sea before? Nah. Orochimaru sighed. I'm not done working on a way to move people in and out with your jutsu. I'm confident that it will just take me a month, maybe 2. That's a bit less than the time we'd take to get there. If it's workable. Naruto thought. If I hire a small crew, is there any way you could, maybe erase the exact location from their memories once we're done? Sakura gave him a somewhat concerned look. How cold of you. Orochimaru said, amused. Well, considering you'd kill them, otherwise. The snake sage shrugged. I should be able to, yes. Then I'll pay for it. The bounty from Sujin's corpse had been a lot of money. I'll leave a mark here, in case anything goes wrong, since distance apparently means nothing. He had tried, of course. Will Sakura join you? Orochimaru asked. Having the extra layer of safety might come in handy. If Naruto managed to find himself stranded. Naruto laughed. If you pay her, sure. They made preparations. 2 more days were spent planning a possible itinerary. The easiest way would likely be to leave from the north of land and rice, to head to the north of the land of earth, where they could take a bigger sailing vessel. It would be needed to handle ocean waves and unpredictable weather, without being too big. A crew of 3 people without including Naruto, Karen, and Sakura would be best. They would have to find the crew there, and convince them to go into uncharted waters with no clear objective but to find a suitable island. Orochimaru had given him a scroll filled with cash in order to make sure they'd manage to get there. Sakura had accepted to come. Naruto didn't dare ask Orochimaru for the amount. The expedition could last as long as 3 months. 3 months. At sea. He felt a bit queasy. Sakura had left one portal close to the mining town, as precaution. Naruto did too, erasing the other ones remotely. For the time being, this one would be the main gate. He'd switch it around once he got there. Well. This is goodbye for now, then. Orochimaru said. Have a safe trip. Anko grinned. Thanks. We'll see you once we reach the island. Naruto added. Take care, Orochimaru-sama, Anko. Sakura just bowed to her latest client. They departed for the harbor. Should be easy enough. Naruto puked over the side of the medium-sized boat they were taking to reach Iwa's northernmost port city. "Can you stop?" Karen asked, looking sick herself. "I'm gonna throw up myself if you keep this up." "I'm sorry, can't help it." Sakura just looked away. Was this their first time on a boat, at all? They had a few days of this, so hopefully they'd get used to it soon. The city of Nato was a major port for the elemental nations. It was also the fifth biggest city in the land of Earth. The nation of Earth was so big that by foot, it would take several days for a ninja to reach it, starting from Iwa. The city itself lay on the North Ocean. It had a long history, having started as a fishing village centuries ago. With the advent of long sea routes to Lightning Country, the daimyo of the land of Earth had a strong reason to invest in Nato's development. Before the end of that century, Nato was the third merchant city of the country. Even today, its economy was still based entirely on shipping. That's why it had two ports. One port lied at the heart of the Reed district for the River One, and directly on the North Ocean for the second one. So let me get these straight. Daher. Naruto stared at the man. You avant me to seal vit uund urtivia me to z me ufna here. He squinted his eyes, sweat dripping from his forehead in concentration. Unuga kunai fi tail as vihire, or vhy. The man started laughing. Naruto turned around, looking at Sakura in despair. I don't think I get this language. He whispered. I think it's just his accent. Do you get him? He asked. I think he told us to get lost. Karen added, hesitant. He sighed. That was the 10th person today. You try, Karen. He was giving up. I guess it just took a little more tact, she said, trying not to look too smug. Karen had found the 3 men she needed, in less than 2 hours. And more than 1 million ryo. And they don't even have a boat. He muttered, in between his teeth. The 3 men were ex-sailors, now working odd jobs. A helpful officer had recommended them to him, saying that they could definitely use a job. What was that? She said, frowning. I said thanks, Karen. Shinjiro. Takea. Hizo. These were the names of the 3 men they would be sailing with. Naruto didn't bother remembering their family names. They would be spending 3 months in pretty close quarters with them, so there was no big point in keeping things too formal, he felt. Speaking of, they were looking for a boat to buy. Apparently, the crew they hired had been a bit down on their luck. They had come from Lightning Country, years ago, and had been part of a shipping company that traded solely with Earth Country. With rising tensions between the nations, it was deemed unprofitable to keep as many boats running, and their company investors had basically cut down on every corner they could. This was why Naruto went with Shinjiro, looking for a boat to buy. Today, Sakura and Karen were doing the same with the remaining crew members. So, what kind of boat do we even need? Well, boat size doesn't really impact its blue water abilities, but we're a crew of 6 people total, so. He thought. Bigger is gonna be faster, too, and less affected by the waves. Naruto remembered how he felt on the small boat. Yeah. You know what, let's get the best, biggest boat we can get for 6. Shinjiro hesitated. Are you sure? This can get more expensive quickly. Like. Up to 2 millions. Well, that's a lot, sure. Naruto winced. But I'm not gonna spend the next 3 months sick. Where can I find one? The sailor shrugged. I know a guy who knows someone. When the sun set, they found their means of transportation. It was a large, modified, ocean-going junk ship with a dragon hull pattern and red battened sails. Its name was Kyojuro. Chapter 32, Long Way North. So are we ready to go soon? Karen asked Naruto, who was tinkering with the interior rooms. Sure. Give me a bit more time. He muttered absent-mindedly, buried nose-deep in scrolls. Karen threw her hands up in the air and got out. Naruto snorted. She should be glad he wasn't planning on modifying the interior rooms while they were on the sea. If anything went wrong then. They could likely teleport back, unless things went very wrong, but what a waste it would be. Long ago, he had managed to goad Orochimaru into explaining how the room expanding thing worked. That was how he had built some of the training grounds in the old base. Rooms bigger on the inside than the outside. He was glad for that. Fitting more room in a boat that was less than 70 meters long would go a long way, when it came to privacy. Now, he just had to make sure that in case a hole blew through the wall, the water wouldn't drown them instantly because it decided to shift size to match the room as well. And well, since he actually had to buy the damn ship outright, he might as well make the most of it. Alright, this should do. Naruto nodded to himself, pretty proud of his work. Welcome aboard. Takea smiled at the girls when they boarded. Your friend, Naruto-san, has taken care of arranging the cabins, as he says. We found it very, very impressive. The captain, Shinjiro, called from the bow. Everybody aboard? Propeller seal loaded. Aye, sir. Hizo replied from the bridge. He was a taciturn sort. Ahead, then. Shinjiro called. Just like that, they departed. The propeller seal glowed, next to the ship's wheel. It used chakra to turn the boat's propeller, making the boat move forward. The Kyojuro left the city of Nada in silence, at around midnight, at the end of May. It went along the Earth Country coast, at first full of big stone houses. Slowly, the space between them grew, until the only light Naruto could discern was Nada's lighthouse, kilometers away, and their own. When 3 in the morning came, he yawned, and told the girls he was going to sleep. They came with him. You did this? Sakura asked in wonder, seeing their cabin, now 3 times as large. That's right. He managed to sound humble, he thought. I have to say that's pretty impressive. Karen added. Thought you'd like it. We'll build some separators for privacy. Tomorrow, though. I'm dead. He passed out in his futon. Shinjiro was a good captain, and an experienced seaman. Naruto realized they had lucked out by finding him and his men. He took this contract with all the seriousness you'd find in a ninja going on an A-rank infiltration mission. 3 young, unknown people wanted to go explore a specific spot, thousands of kilometers away, in the open sea, and they could only tell them where that was exactly once they were on the sea. Sure thing. Just give me the general direction and I'll head towards that, until we're on our way. We'll adjust then. It was a simple application of enough money to not raise too many questions. Hizo and Takea trusted the man's word without any question, and everything seemed to move smoothly. They had a supply of fresh water sealed in a jar, as well as a boiling plant to desalinate seawater. Food reserves were kept in a large scroll, but for most of the journey, they would fish to eat, and ration their rice, fruits, and vegetables. Near the middle of the day, bored of staring at the open sea, Naruto went to the 3rd cabin he had expanded. If they were to spend 2 to 3 months on a boat, they'd need a training room. He'd teach the sailors some basics if they were interested, too. The walls were not reinforced yet, so he'd stick to taijutsu and weapons. He created a clone using half his chakra, ensuring that he could take a few hits. Naruto summoned a weapon, basing it upon Sasuke's. He focused on creating a blade as dull as he could, then handed it to the clone. He'd practice dodging and blocking today. Poems? Karen asked, looking over Sakura's shoulder. She looked back at her, tilting her head back. Sure. I like some of Keime's works. Well, the more recent ones. The man used to be too long-winded. Karen took a seat next to her, on the deck. The boat rocked slowly, steadily. You're a big reader, aren't you? She asked. Sakura nodded. I used to read more as a kid, though. I've got less time now, since I have to stay sharp. Actually. She thought. I think it's the first time in a long while I don't have to sleep with my guard up. I feel my body, relaxing. Damn. Yeah. She nodded. I still wouldn't go back to Konoha, though. What made you leave, in the end? Then she added hurriedly. You don't have to answer, if you don't want to. Sakura shook her head. No. It's fine. Well, you met after I got crippled. Being a shinobi was all I knew, and to be honest, all I wanted. Karen nodded. She continued. But once Konoha discharged me, they wouldn't take me back in the Corps. No matter how much I insisted. And I couldn't get anybody to train me. Not that my parents would have paid for it, they insisted that I go to civilian school. Ah. Sakura made a face. It's not that it's bad on its own. But the more I thought about what kind of future awaited me, the more I wanted to go back to being a ninja. Which I couldn't. I became very hard to deal with, I guess. My parents and I ended up having a big fight. And I decided I couldn't stand it anymore. I left soon after, with a merchant troupe. There was an old shinobi in the group, escorting them, and I guess he took mercy on me. Oh, that's where you learned this triangular chakra blade thing. Sakura laughed. Nah, this I figured on my own, because I needed a weapon I could carry anywhere, even in an onsen. That's specific. Don't ask. She shrugged. But anyway. The man taught me many things, including how to be self-reliant. Kiyoshi was a mercenary, and that's basically how I became one, too. Is he? Yeah. Sakura nodded. He died a while ago, apparently. I heard a few months later. Sorry to hear that. What's done is done. The year I spent with him was worth more than he would ever know, and that's my only regret. Sakura smiled. She thought for a second. Well, I wish he could see me beat the shit out of Naruto, too. Karen laughed. The next day, Karen joined Naruto for his physical training. She specialized in hand-to-hand combat, while he specialized in weapons and elemental-style jutsu. As long as they kept to taijutsu, without using chakra to enhance their strikes, or lightning to enhance his speed, they were on a similar level. Naruto was way stronger, but their base speed was comparable. Naruto parried her right-hand chop, and deviated her following punch. He countered with a rising kick, forcing her to step back. He threw a flat palm attack at her face, making her lean back until she was in a reverse bridge position. Instead of standing back up, she put her hands behind her head. She moved into a handstand, then did a split. Karen started spinning her legs extremely fast, kicking at him while moving forward. He parried the strikes, but she was spinning fast enough that he could not grab her. He leaped back. What the fuck was that? He laughed. She smirked, jumped back on her beat and delivered a barrage of kicks aimed at his face. He dodged all of them, a few coming close. He threw a punch toward her torso and she weaved to the side. It only grazed her shoulder. Naruto was about to go on the offensive again, but then noticed that she was bleeding from where his fist had grazed her. Ah, sorry, Karen. You're bleeding. It's practice, don't sweat it. She laughed. Break. He nodded. Sure, clean that up too. Karen took off her overshirt, only now noticing how sweaty she was, and started cleaning the wound on her shoulder. She noticed Naruto's eyes on her tank top, and the way the fabric stuck to her breasts. She felt slightly self-conscious. Her hard nipples were clearly visible through it. He averted his eyes. Wanna go for round 2? Naruto asked, going back to more familiar territory. Sure, she said quickly, glad for it. Wow. You ever seen this kind of fish before, Shinjiro? Karen whistled. He looked at her, amused. Yes, several times. They're native to this part of the North Sea. Around the Kyojuro were schools of fish with oblong bodies, skin that looked like scales, and green eyes. Around them, red and white fishes with flat bodies undulated. It seemed like the fish stuck to the boat for a few hours, with no clear reason. Karen felt all of their small chakra. The ocean truly was full of life, and she realized for the first time what it meant. Still looking for ways to improve the boat, I see. Sakura said, when she came into the room, the next day. They still haven't put any kind of separators, and the futons are basically on top of each other. He grumbled, still reading the scrolls Orochimaru had left him. Might as well, considering how much it cost me. Sakura laughed. As far as I remember, you always loved hoarding money. He looked at her. I needed it back then. Ino would always take us to fancy restaurants. And she had forgotten her wallet a few more times than he cared to remember. Yeah. Remember that little ice cream cafe, near Wakui's house? Definitely. Why would I pay the price of a full meal for two mochi? It's all Ino's fault. Yup. That's probably why I had to become a one-man team back then. To afford ice cream. I guess doing all these construction missions will finally come in handy, once we find an island to build something on. Sakura joked. If it doesn't, I'll still have a decent career to fall back on. He winked. They had stopped the boat, and started fishing. Well, the fishing part was pretty easy. Naruto focused lightning into his hand and put it into the sea, and they just had to pick the dead fish that floated up afterward. So they were mostly taking a break, since it was a nice day, sunny, but not too warm. Sakura came out of the water with a smile, squeezing the water out of her hair. Naruto stared at her, his eyes slowly trailing down. His cheeks reddened a bit and he looked away. She caught it but said nothing. Karen did, too. Sakura can't help but take a look herself. Naruto grew up very nicely. Tall, and still growing, somehow with long, thick blonde hair. His abs are thick, flat, and defined. His chest is full, and his shoulders and back look powerful. There's some light blonde hair on his torso, and surprisingly for a ninja, he's got no scars at all. Once, he said he had a few that had taken a long time to fade away, but even these had, in the end. She's not sure what he's talking about. And scars are not supposed to always fade out, but he's an oddity. There are many seals covering his body, though, all of them composed of only a few bold lines. He told her he would tell her about them, at some point. She finds them pretty interesting. And, he's got very nice legs. Very, very nice legs. From an objective point of view, she thinks. He's attractive. But she sees him as Ino's. She won't interfere in that. After a full week on the sea, Naruto felt like it was never going to end. When they saw an island, thousands of kilometers away from their destination still, he asked Shinjiro if they could stop for a second. The man shrugged and called for Hizo to stop at the island. Naruto asked for an estimation of their position on the world map. They had done 1/10 of the way. 1/10. He jumped on the water in frustration and ran to the island. There was nothing here. It was just a stray piece of desert land in the middle of nowhere. He still walked in the sand, just glad for the distraction. And for being able to step on stable ground for the first time in a while. Deep down, he worried if they would even find a suitable island where they were going. What if settling closer was a better idea, in the end? The risk of being found out was bigger, though. He decided against it. It was not long before Sakura and Karen joined him, and they play-fought in the sand. They were back on the boat, and Naruto noticed that he could not remember the last time they had seen human life. For several days their awake hours were spent on training, reading, talking and experimenting. Seals, jutsu, ideas for their pet projects. How to start a village. How to recruit people. None of them knew the first thing about it, so they would likely have to leave the operating part to Orochimaru. By early June, a hazy mist floated over the water. There were heavy clouds up in the sky, and nothing to see. The only reason Naruto wasn't worried about it too much was because the sailors didn't seem to care much. They ran the boat efficiently, always keeping 2 people in charge of navigation, while the last one either rested or ran maintenance checks on the boat. They were in a strange area the day after that, too, with luminous animals shining brightly. It was very strange weather. Humid and heavy while it looked as though it should feel cold. The sea was illuminated, while the sky was so dark you couldn't see the stars. The crew spent 3 entire days in this environment. You know, there are some days I want to curse Orochimaru. Naruto said. Don't like our little trip? I'm hurt. Sakura chuckled. I've spent the last 40 hours trying to understand what the hell his notes on natural energy's influence on the human body meant. It's so dry. So you're bored? Hell yeah, I'm bored. Want to let off some steam with me? Sakura asked, looking him in the eye. And his newfound sex drive was acting up. These dem seals. Sure. he said hesitantly. This was Sakura. Was she? Pure taijutsu or chakra allowed? She asked, stretching her arms. Let's go with chakra, I reinforced the walls some. Naruto sighed. Damn, but you're really fast. Naruto commented, seeing Sakura practice moving on the water. Dashing, weaving. Stopping. Thanks. Turns out having great chakra control really helps with speed. I may not have fancy lightning or wind tricks like some, but I manage. Any cool tricks you picked up? Naruto asked. She smiled. I thought you'd never ask. Watch this. Sakura said, leaping over a wave. She caught the back of it, gliding down on its surface. She picked speed as she surfed, until it looked as though she were flying. Naruto tried not to look too jealous. He didn't have the control for this, and likely never would. She smirked, noticing his envy. He cleared his throat. That's pretty neat. You probably don't even need a boat, then. Should have gone to the islands on your own, big girl. Yeah. And where would I sleep? I'm not exactly a fish, she said, rolling her eyes. Smell like it, thou dash. He choked on the water jet she hit him in the face with. Why do I feel so depressed? Karen asked, laying on her back, staring at nothing. Naruto chuckled. You've read the same books as I did. It's the lack of Sunday. Yeah. Still though. Wanna fight? Taijutsu again. Nah, wrestle me. Naruto's eyebrows rose. Do you even know how to? I'll learn, she said, confidently. You sure? Are you afraid of me? Karen smirked. He shrugged. She pulled on his arm, pretty uselessly. He didn't hesitate, slipping in the opening she left, pinning her arms down at her sides and trapping her against him. She squirmed, trying to loosen his hold. Naruto just grabbed her tighter. Her legs were free, but once she tried to use them to kick him, he just used his own to block her. It was probably the first time she really got how much stronger than her he was. Concede? Naruto asked, close to her ear. I can still move. She managed to get out. Suit yourself. She started squirming against him again. He could smell her, now. Not the perfume, but her natural scent. She got one leg out, and used it to push herself back, surprising him. They rolled and tumbled in a mess of limbs. She fell on top of him, landing her hands on both sides of his face. Sitting on his belly, Karen was breathing hard, her face flushed. She was smiling proudly, though. See? I got out. Sure. You forgot you were supposed to try to win, though. He smirked, pulling her down to the floor again. She yelped. It was 6 in the evening, and the sky was starting to turn gray and heavy. The wind picked up a bit too, and soon it was raining heavily. Hizo triggered the release seal and soon enough, pillars extended from the floor, allowing them to pull the wooden roof over it. Naruto stayed to watch the rain under its protection. An angry wind raged, the ocean was rough, and thunder was striking. Karen came to sit next to him, their legs touching, without a word. They stayed there to watch the thunderstorm, some of their worries fading away. Chapter 33, Sea Change. So, how many people did you do it with? Karen asked. What? Naruto asked, dumbly. How does this link thing of yours work? Ah. Naruto answered. Still not sure, the 2 times I pulled it off, I wasn't really thinking very hard on it. Or thinking at all. It's only Sasuke and Sakura. If you remember, I tried with Orochimaru, but nothing happened. Ah. I see. Karen said. It sounds really useful. Sure. He nodded. I would have loved being able to teleport earlier. We could have avoided many things. Karen stayed silent for a while. Do you think we could try it again? She asked hesitantly. You and I. He paused. An amused grin spread on his face. Why is that? You want yourself some flashy weapon, don't you? She avoided looking at his face. Yes. That's it. I'm curious. Sure, let's try it out, then. The first attempt failed. Karen looked disappointed, but ready to stop there. Nah, wait a second. You want to try again? She asked, hesitant. Yeah. Let me try to focus on what made it work in the first place. He kept a hand over Karen's, sitting at the small table they built in their room. What made it work with Sakura? What had made it work with Suzuki? What was different here? They had been in danger, in both situations. Was that it? It could be, but then he wouldn't be able to reproduce it. Danger, danger, danger. There had been a need for a weapon. A weapon, not just to kill, but to protect. To protect people he cared for. And there had been trust. He trusted Sakura. He trusted Suzuki. And he trusted Karen. He wanted her to live. To grow, and have a chance to be happy. She was Karen, and he would do everything in his power to ensure that. Naruto felt the same feeling again. His chakra and Karen's, connecting. Similar, but different. He pulled. In a flash of thunder, a pair of gold bands appeared around her upper arms. Karen's presence settled somewhere in his unconscious mind. Naruto felt exhausted. Karen's smile was blinding. She tackled him into a hug, making both of them fall on the floor. Middle of June came. The heat started to rise. Naruto gave up on wearing shirts, trusting his chakra to protect him from the worst of the sun rays. The sailors were slowly learning how to channel it, and soon enough, they joined him in that. The girls settled for bikini tops. If Naruto had to describe the ocean today. Empty. Nothing in sight. At all. Before, there had been the occasional rocky mountain island. Some flat deserted ones, even some with trees. Right now, there was nothing. No waves. Nothing on the horizon. And of course, it had been weeks since they had last seen another ship. Naruto wondered what the sailors were thinking. He had told them about his ability and that they were not truly at risk of not coming back. But he had the feeling they would be just as stoic if he didn't have it. The sea was beautiful, though, shining bright blue, looking almost flat. Karen and Sakura were passing around a sphere of pure water and chakra, trying to keep it stable with every throw. Takeo was sipping on some rice beer. He had brought liters of it in a seal jar, looking entirely at ease. Naruto was sitting next to him, in comfortable silence. They had been weeks in each other's presence for weeks, and there was no point in constantly talking. He had a question, though. How deep is the ocean floor? Ah, that would depend. We are in the North Ocean, so. I think the average depth should be at around 4 kilometers. How deep is this? Well. No human ever managed to get deeper than 500 meters, and that's using chakra. Let's ignore that. After 2 kilometers, you would start feeling very cold. I mean, your eardrums, lungs, likely your ribs would have been crushed long ago, but yeah. Ah. I see. Are there creatures living down there? Takeo snorted. Creatures is the right word here, son. These things often look like they're from another planet. Karen was experimenting with the gold bands. Without wanting to brag, she had a knack for experimenting. So she figured out what they did faster than Naruto would have on his own. Simply put, it seemed they made anything chakra made permanent. Things slid in place, and a chakra construct became natural, for lack of a better word. As though it were part of the world already. A seal, a construct. Using the bands on these made them rely on natural energy instead of human chakra. There were still limits, in the sense that a seal would need to replenish if it pulled too much energy, but this could change everything. Naruto dubbed the ability Natural Order. It wasn't as egregiously bad as some of the other names he had come up with before, so Karen ended up using it. First thing they did was use it on the propeller, so that they could keep it on permanently, as the amount of energy it required was pretty low. It also had the added bonus of making it stronger, more effective. They would make good use of it. That should likely cut the travel time by a large amount. Half, maybe. because it seemed the wind had something against them, most of the time. Naruto went back to tinkering with seals with redoubled fervor, after that. It seemed he could use a fraction of the ability himself, but in his case, it worked better with his own seals or the weapons he summoned personally. Karen didn't really seem to have this limitation. The first thing he did was reinforce the walls of the training room, and strengthen the fireproofing seals. Not having to recharge them every night would be a blessing, too. This should reduce the risk of destroying anything on their boat. He still had built no separators between the rooms, but all three of them had taken to late-night planning in their futon, ending up sleeping in what looked more like a pile of bodies, once the morning came. He'd get around to doing that. At some point. The hull could use stronger maintenance seals. He could likely copy the propeller seal and build a second one, since they had left with a lot of raw materials. Maybe a location seal could be used to pinpoint their approximate position. And then he could synchronize it with the paper map, maybe? Soundproofing the boat could work, too. Inside, outside as well? Something to keep the temperature more constant. And what if he enhanced clothing and equipment with sealing? Sakura was already sleeping. He brainstormed with Karen, who endured it with a fond smile, taking notes and coming up with twists on the ideas, as well as new ones, until the later hours of the night. Then they passed out on the floor. When Karen woke up, it was late morning. Sakura was gone. She let out a muffled noise when she realized Naruto was spooning her, his warm body pressed against her. He was deep asleep. He had a tendency to move a lot during the night, so she assumed he was the one who had rolled over. Then she realized something else. Naruto was hard. Very hard. She blushed bright red, his erection poking into her ass. Karen felt heat between her legs, her traitorous body responding. Karen moved away. He mumbled something in his sleep and got closer again. Karen felt his breath down her neck, and a strong arm wrapped around her. His length was prodding her ass again. She ignored the ache between her legs, waited until he rolled away, still asleep. Karen didn't enjoy the sudden absence as much as she thought she would. She went for a very cold shower. When he was not testing out new sealing methods with his clones, where his copy of Sujin's notes really came in handy, Naruto practiced chakra control. He understood how Sakura glided across the water, but he could not replicate it. The best he could do was propel himself loudly. He wanted to get to the point where he could apply a seal without ink on any surface. Writing seals by hand every time simply took too much time. Naruto was progressing, having cut down the numbers of supporting symbols that he needed to write down for a given seal by half on average. The laundry seal he had created in the last few days was pretty helpful, as you just had to write it on a barrel, connect it to a source of water, could be another seal barrel, a soap or cleaning agent, throw your clothes in it and they would get cleaned in less than 10 minutes. It wasn't going to change his world, but he could likely earn some decent money with it. He just had to make them permanent and sell them after. He would put the finishing touches on his diving suit, soon. Making a map turned out to be pretty straightforward, too, if a bit lacking in terms of precision. One location seal was put on the front of the boat, and another at the back. Both working with natural energy. It was easy enough to extract data about your current position from a location seal. Then all he had to do would be to make a copy of the world map, split it into a grid, and synchronize the boat's position on it. And since it worked for a boat, there was no reason it wouldn't work on a personal scale, by attaching the seals to a pocket watch, or anything a person could carry, that could also fit a paper map. Easy enough. They were moving much faster with two propellers. According to the map, they would be at around the midpoint, and they were only nearing the end of June. The sailors had a more precise idea of where they were going now, since Naruto actually had to tell them that at some point. He would likely offer to teleport them back, once he was done, sparing them another 2-month trip. The boat could stay here, as it might come in handy when it came to navigating this oceanic part of the world. They still had a month, then, Naruto thought. 1 month without any probable danger in sight. At least not in the form of stronger enemy shinobi. He had wanted to stop, but the appeal of enhancing his growth, at a time where he felt he was not seeing too much of it. Well, it was starting to sound more and more appealing. Orochimaru was not here, but they had established what kind of ancient seals would be a decent fit. Maybe now was the time to complete another set. So yeah, that's what my tattoos are. You've been carving your body up with a dagger in order to force your body to grow? Karen asked, horrified. She had known he and Orochimaru were experimenting with something that led to Naruto recovering for days on end, of course, but none of them had given her more detail. Sakura said nothing. She had wondered what the sort of minimalist symbols on his body were for. I mean, anything sounds bad when you put it like this. He said. Anything? Give me another example, then. Nothing. Could it work for me, too? Sakura asked quietly. He stopped to think about it, then winced. I'm not sure. It's an Uzumaki clan art, and let's say that their most defining characteristic was a strong yang chakra, and resilient bodies. I wouldn't risk it. He said, scratching the back of his head. I see. She said, not too disappointed. What about me? Karen asked. Ah. Naruto thought about it, hesitant. It might work. Just. The process is a bit rough. How rough? He sighed. Look, I'll let both of you see what it's like next time. Next time? Sakura asked. Yeah. Now seems like a good time to do it. Apparently, their effect might be stronger during puberty. Or so Orochimaru had said, but none of them were certain of that. But still, you should really think about it longer. It might also fuck with your mind a bit. Like. Well. They made him a bit easier to anger, more eager to fight, and hornier apparently. They will enhance certain aspects of your personality. You said enhance though, not change. Sakura said. Yeah. That's true. And you need time to recover from it. It can be up to a full year, maybe 2 years, with less chakra capacity. It's not something Uzumaki are lacking, though. Karen said, folding her arms. No, but did Karen think he was trying to play some reverse psychology trick on her, or was she doing it on her own? And both you and Orochimaru-sama are probably going to get into more trouble, won't you? He pursed his lips. Then, I want in. Show me how to do it. Karen finished. He gave up. Okay. Maybe I'll steer away from anything fertility related this time. I'm on a boat with Karen and Sakura. I don't want to end up fucking things up. He was sitting in front of Sakura and Karen, wearing only a towel. Karen was definitely staring at him, likely trying to understand how his seals worked. It was good that she was being proactive about it. He nodded in approval. She looked away. There were 3 important seals he wanted to complete before they might lose in potency. He was still growing for now, but he knew it wouldn't last for long. All right, watch closely then. The girls nodded. He drew most of the symbols in ink on the floorboards. Then he summoned a ceremonial crystal dagger. Takemikazuchi. Another Raijin. God of Thunder. God of Swords. Conquest. War. Power. He carved the seal right below his left shoulder, opposing Raijin, on his right shoulder. With almost no sound. He pulled the symbols on the floor into the new shining mark. He felt a bit more unbalanced. Naruto drew the next set on the floor, patiently. Sakura and Karen watched in silence. Takemi God of Wind. God of Hunting. War. Strength. Ah, it was fertility too. He winced. There really was no escaping it, then. Naruto absorbed the seals on the floor once more. According to old legends, Takemikazuchi and Takemi were gods who fought each other. He could almost believe it, right now. Both marks were burning, more painful than the rest were. He must have been looking pretty rough, because both Sakura and Karen were starting to look kinda worried. I'm fine. I'm fine. Why was his voice so rough? All right. Another one to knock down. He drew the seals very carefully. Susanoo no Mikoto. God of Seas. God of Storms. Thunder and Lightning. Wildness. Moral Ambivalence. This should allow him to reign in the other wind and thunder kami, who are supposed to serve under him, according to legend. If this holds in reality, he will have to see Susanoo fits along his spine as well. When he pulled it in, he barely managed to suppress a scream. Is it over? Karen asked, ready to rush in. Almost. Naruto wheezed. Tomo. He carved one into the left side of his lower back. Tomo. He carved another one on the right side of his lower back. Tomo. Last one went along his spine, too. I'm done. He rasped. They were the most basic of the ancient seals, not requiring any surrounding seals, as the intent for it was one thing, and one thing only. Amplify the other's seals. He felt very sleepy, all of a sudden. There was a lot of blood on the ground. Somebody caught him. The next few days were spent in a daze. It had never felt so rough before. Sakura was reading a book next to his bed. We told Shinjiro and the crew that you were feeling a bit under the weather, it should only last a few days. She said, keeping a careful eye on him. Thank you. He said, weakly. It's nothing. They lapsed into silence. She turned a page. I think I'm gonna pass on the seal carving thing. Sakura ended up saying. He laughed, before coughing. I don't blame you. If it puts you in this sort of state, while being both Uzumaki and a Jinchuriki. I don't really want to know what it's going to do to me. Or my chakra levels. Fair enough. Karen still wants to do it, though. Really. She can be kind of stubborn. Understatement of the century. Is it me, or is the room freezing? Naruto asked, shivering, in the middle of the night. Karen looked around in confusion. No, at all. It's actually very warm. Ah. Then I might be a bit sicker than I thought. Is there anything I can do for you? No. No, I don't think so. I'm not done with the temperature seals. Maybe they would have helped. Karen huffed. Look, this can wait. Plus, it's not actually cold out there. Your body temperature is lower, though, I imagine. Ah, shit. Can you get me one more cover? I don't think it's going to change much. She answered. He kept shivering, not saying anything. This was going to be a long night. He heard her hesitate. I'm going to help you, okay? Don't turn around, please. He heard the sound of clothes being removed and felt himself panic. What was she doing? Karen lifted the covers of his futon and slipped in. Karen. Don't. I'm not wearing any dash. She embraces him, her arms around him, pulling herself tight against him. Apparently, she's not wearing anything either. I know you'd do the same. Let's sleep, then. In the end, he couldn't really sleep or even turn around. He did feel warmer though, inside and outside. Naruto did feel that it was worth it, once he recovered. It seemed as though his body was just working better, all over. Including things like faster recovery, less need for sleep and senses that were sharper. Not expected, but apparently, the Tomo seal was much more potent than he had thought. 2 more hours awake every day was probably one of the most significant changes. Over the course of 50 years, it was the equivalent of 5 more conscious years. Now, he just had to put it to good use. Thanks for last time, Karen. She didn't meet his eyes. Don't worry about it. Naruto's chakra reserves definitely felt smaller than normal. Well, he wouldn't need a lot of it for the foreseeable future, and it was still more than double what most elite shinobi worked with, so he wouldn't complain too much. In the meantime, he buried himself in other projects. Chapter 34, Close Quarters. You're still sure you want to go through with it? Naruto asked Karen, one more time. They had gone over the possible combinations, and settled on something that would make sense for her. Entirely. She answered, a bit afraid but resolute. All 3 of them. Yes. You have them firmly in mind, then. Yes. I guess we can get started, then. It was her turn to sit on her floor, now. Naruto drew the supporting seals, as only the actual carving had to be done by her hand. Dagger, please, she asked. He summoned a crystal dagger and handed it to her, wordlessly. Megatama, he heard her say. He remembered the meanings as though it were yesterday. Health, strength, stamina, fertility, soul, moon. She plunged the dagger in her belly and he was tempted to look away. Karen doesn't make a sound, pulling the surrounding seals in. She gasped then, before motioning for him to continue. Mokumo Kuren. Karen carved the circular symbol on her forehead. The many eyes. A creature supposed to be capable of haunting houses, and seeing everywhere. Another legend, more specific to Uzushio, talked about a spirit able to see everything, the all-seeing eye. That's the interpretation Karen focused on. She compacted the many symbols around her into the seal, until all that was left was a single purple dot in the middle of her forehead. Last one. Amaterasu. This one went to the middle of her back, along her spine. Goddess of the sun. Purity and order. Divine right. Vitality. Fertility. Karen stiffened, her jaws locked. She let out a scream once it was done. Naruto caught her. Karen spent the following 4 days in bed. Naruto kept a clone with her at all times, while he worked on finally separating the room in 3 parts. It really didn't take long, as they had plenty of raw material. 2 walls were set up relatively quickly. Making them hold with natural order was even easier than using regular construction binding jutsu. Then he soundproofed every room. Now they'd have some privacy. He nodded. That was good. Karen was looking better. She was not looking so pale anymore, and he felt himself relax a bit. Naruto. Oh. You're awake. He came closer. Yes. A bit, dazed, though. It's very warm, too. He winced. Ah. I still haven't managed to do anything about that. Sorry. She chuckled. No, don't worry about it. It's all right. Do you want something to eat, to read, maybe? No, no thanks. Karen hesitated. Come. Keep me company, maybe. Sure thing. I'm here. He grinned. No. I mean come closer. I'm cold. Huh? But you just said you felt too warm. That was before. I changed my mind. She let out a shiver. It looked kinda exaggerated. Well, if she was cold, she was cold. All right, then. He nodded resolutely. I won't let you freeze. You helped me, too. I'll do the same. Yes please. She said, nodding fast. He removed his clothes right away and she let out a small whimper. Oh, sorry. He said sheepishly. I guess I should have warned you. Well, you can close your eyes. Yes. Yes, thanks. She nodded, red in the face. He really should have warned her, he thought. He removed his underwear, and she didn't close her eyes at all. She's a strange one. Well, that was Karen, he guessed. Scoot over. He said. He would have felt a bit more tense normally, but this was only about helping his closest friend. He took her in his arms, letting her head rest against his chest. She moaned. He nodded. He knew how it felt to be this cold. It must have been very relieving to feel human warmth. Karen was having a very pleasant dream. It was a strangely intense erotic dream. She moaned and let herself relax. More. Just a bit more. There. She was so close. She let out a small cry as she came. Karen woke up. She was straddling Naruto, who was fast asleep. There was something hard and very wet grinding against her lower lips. She put a hand to her mouth to avoid whimpering, and looked down. She had been wrong, nothing was grinding against her. Instead, she was the one grinding herself on his length. She avoided staring too much, averting her yes. She felt heat rush to her face. As for why it was so wet, well, she could see it was also her. What the hell was she doing? Did this ritualistic shit just give me sexomnia? No wonder Naruto was restless. She slowly lifted herself away from him, stifling a little gasp. She needed a shower. She really needed a cold shower. She needed. He's fast asleep. She's painfully horny. Wake him up? Then what? A shower. 2 minutes later, she was in the shower. There are 2 fingers buried up to their second knuckle inside her drenched folds. Naruto was not sure why Karen looked so guilty. He thought that's what it was the days after. What he knew for sure was that her vision, deemed incurable even by medical ninja, was getting better day after day. It wasn't long before she got rid of the glasses her late mother had given her, sealing them within the necklace she was always wearing. She said her chakra sensing ability was slowly getting better too, whether it was in terms of range or precision. As expected, she felt her chakra has taken on a quality it didn't have before, even if her reserves will be a fair bit smaller for the foreseeable future. That means that even her healing ability is amplified. It wasn't long before the scars on her body, all of them, started fading away. It was one of the only times Naruto saw her cry. He took her in his arms, and he could feel her squirming a bit. Later on, she helped him build a third, and even a fourth propeller. When the wind is blowing in the right direction and all propellers are running, it feels as though they are flying. The sailors had trouble believing it too, it seemed. They were getting close to the area they were aiming for. Just a few more weeks. A few more weeks. The waves were more tumultuous in this part of the world, Naruto noticed. Whenever they stopped to fish, or just to take a break, the boat was swinging from side to side. Seeing Karen's face, Sakura used a water jutsu to make the zone directly around their boat a bit more stable for a few minutes. She nodded thankfully. "Tell me, Karen," Naruto asked. "Yes." She whipped her head. "Am I wrong, or are there stronger chakra signatures in the water?" She nodded. "There are. I'm not sure what is the cause, but there must be some pretty large fish swimming in here." "Does that mean we're getting closer, Shinjiro?" The man shrugged. "Well, we are pretty close." Seeing Naruto's unimpressed face, he continued, laughing. "I don't know about the fish, but I would say it's more likely to mean that the bigger predators moved to this part of the ocean, where there's probably more food for them. Strange that they are so concentrated, though. Anything to be worried about?" "Well, likely not. Either there's no big predator around here at all, or we passed it already. Couldn't it still be ahead of us?" "Sure. That's also possible." The man shrugged. Regular training was also a decent way to relieve some tension. Which could have been a real problem, otherwise. Naruto won a spar against Sakura. He held a hand to her, picked her up and avoided staring at her glistening body. He'd gotten decent at that, by now. The seals were definitely a stronger influence, now that he had reinforced them with several tomo. He could manage, but mostly because he didn't want to ruin his friendship with either Sakura or Karen. Also, he was somewhat used to it, at this point. Sakura left the room, which was starting to feel like an oven. Karen initiated with a high kick. He slipped under, his palm strike finding her in the stomach. She grunted, moving away. They exchanged a pair of kicks, then she parried his punches. Still, he could tell she was distracted. He caught her in a headlock, but she managed to slip an elbow in his choke. She had gotten stronger with the daily training, and he can't help but notice she looked stronger, firmer than she used to. And the way sweat drips down her neck. Her flushed face. He heard her gasp. He could guess the reason, feeling a bit embarrassed. She raised her hips until her ass pressed against him firmly. "Oh, no. That's not good." She was flushed, looking as though she were in a trance. Karen rubbed herself against him. She let out a strange little noise. Naruto let her go. "Sorry, Karen." He let out. "No. No. It's me," she said, just as embarrassed. "Ah. No big deal. I guess it happens." He laughed, trying to break the tension. "We've been stuck on a boat for a while, and the seals are definitely not helping." "Yes. Yes. The seals." She nodded frenetically. "Yes. Karen looked at him intensely. Almost expectantly. I'm going to get some fresh air. Ah. He headed for the showers. Naruto spent most of his day doing anything but thinking about the training session. Karen did the exact same, staying mostly on the deck. Then they slept and proceeded to be slightly more awkward than usual around each other the next morning. None of them worried, they knew it was just a very temporary thing. They were too good friends for anything like that to last. Is it night already? He had spent a lot of time indoors that day, and hadn't been paying a lot of attention to what was happening outdoors. It was pitch black outside. By now, it was a sight he had seen what felt like 100 of times. Still, there was something strange about it. No stars were shining in the sky. He felt a bit uneasy. He could barely see the stairs he was about to climb to get to the deck, so he made a single-handed seal. Lightning release, starlight. He had made sure the ball of energy would be more bright than usual. Even then, it barely illuminated his way. That was definitely not normal. Naruto went up the stairs carefully. Where is everyone? Why was there no one? He was starting to wonder if this was another dream, meeting with the sage's son. Naruto was on the deck now. At any point, he was expecting these accursed red eyes to stare him down. There. He saw a light. Ah. That was coming from the quarterdeck. He went there, keeping himself anchored to the boat with chakra, and knocked at the door. Karen opened the door, motioning for him to come in, silently. She closed the door behind him, and the soundproofing seal came back up. Everybody was here. For the first time since the beginning of the trip, Shinjiro looked uneasy. Strange how worried that made him feel. What's happening? He asked. That's the thing. Hizo answered. We're not sure yet. And how late is it? Shinjiro cracked a mirthless smile. Middle of the afternoon. Something cold settled in Naruto's gut. Takea muttered, nervously. I think there might be a reason why nobody comes in this part of the world. I don't know what it means, but there's almost no signs of life around here. Barely any fish, only a few chakra signatures. Karen said, biting her fingernails. I used an echolocation jutsu in the water, and these fish don't seem to be fish. Sakura added. Naruto thought for a second. Well, I've made a diving suit. It's very basic, just a closed-off helmet with a supply of air sealed into it. I won't be able to go very deep, but this should let us see if there's something in the water causing the artificial night. You can't be serious. Karen said. You want to dive in this shit? I don't see a better option. Relax, it's just going to be like a night dive. That's too dangerous. She folded her arms. Why don't you send a clone? Sakura asked. He blinked. Ah, yes. Naruto's clone hesitated for a second, before jumping in the water. It was freezing. That made no sense, as the water had been pretty warm just a few hours ago. His helmet was working, he could breathe and see as though he were outside of the water. There was nothing besides dark water around him, and a few red fluorescent lights, that he hoped were plankton. He sent chakra through his body to keep himself warm and swim faster. Then he dove deeper. Pitch black. Even deeper. His chakra senses could feel something. It was a sunken vessel. It was resting on an underwater mountain, the kind that were supposed not to exist in this part of the world. Should he go in? He did. He opened the door and something drew a labored breath next to him. It was the same sound a half-strangled person would make when taking a deep breath of much-needed air. He panicked. Then suddenly he was on his back, staring at the surface, everything appearing in shades of darkness. How did he get in this position? Why was he here? There was a shadow coming toward him. It let out a blood-curdling scream. So did Naruto. He shielded himself with chakra and let out a bolt of lightning. It had been a fish. Only a fish, if a freaky-looking one. He looked around himself. These were definitely piles of human bones in front of the hole in the hull. One of them emitted bubbles and started moving. Naruto froze. His senses were picking up something irregular. The bubbles were not coming from the bone piles, but from behind. He was suddenly grabbed and dragged downwards, pulled at a speed he could not understand. He was being pulled to the bottom of the sea. He pulsed his chakra one last time, forming a mental image of what had grabbed him. Then he detonated himself, hoping to at least dissuade the thing to come after them. The real Naruto gasped for air when he received the memories. Holy fuck. Are you okay? Sakura asked. What was that? There's a boat carcass down there. A boat? In this part of the world? Shinjiro asked. Yes, and I would say it was a pretty old one, from the style of it. The kind you see in old books about the Age of Sail. There were bones, skeletons in it. That can't be. Shinjiro said, somewhat tense. I know what I saw. Naruto said, arms folded. You're sure the boat is that old? I'd say so. Why? What's the big deal? Well, bones can't last long in seawater. How long? 5 years, or so, at most. Naruto said nothing. The boat down there was much older. And had been here for centuries, he was sure. A mystery to file for later. Not for when they were still on this god-forsaken sea. And there's the creature that grabbed me. My clone, I mean. I don't know what it was exactly, but it was huge. Like a monstrous sea dragon. It had several shiny beads, or eyes, I couldn't see much. I don't know. And a large chakra signature. What do you think we should do? Isn't it obvious? We put more distance between us and this god-forsaken place. The creature lives deep, and probably won't come up, unless it feels we are worth the effort to eat. Let's hope it can't catch us. Very well, then. Full speed ahead. Nobody went to bed. And if Naruto kept everybody close together, in case he had to try to teleport all of them back on the continent. Nobody said anything about it. Hours passed. The sky turned from pitch black to a normal night sky all of a sudden. Karen even felt the exact moment they crossed the boundary field that cast the starless night. It was some sort of illusion. She said, finally sitting down. Probably the creatures. Naruto focused on the chakra he could feel fading away in the distance. Yeah, it feels like it's its chakra. I had never thought. Takea muttered a prayer. That must have been a sea god. He said. An ocean-dwelling one, maybe a sea dragon. Naruto didn't really believe in gods. There was something big underwater, though. Later. They'd deal with it later. They had islands to find. Whatever that was, it was sentient enough to have this field of night around itself. The bright side of it was that they would know when they were in its territory. That was somewhat reassuring. Well, Naruto said, this was pretty fucking horrible. I'm going to try to forget all about tonight. This afternoon, I mean. I'm going to sleep now. Kizo went too, leaving the two others to lead the ship. When Naruto reached his room, Sakura and Karen were in front of it, each holding her futon. Wanna have a sleepover? Sakura asked. He chuckled a bit, feeling a bit less on edge. Sure, why not? Naruto woke up sleeping on his side, Sakura spooning him, and Karen spooning her. If they're awake, they're not saying anything. They stayed like this for a while. Yesterday was bad. Over the next few days, they travel at maximum speed, aiming to cover the remaining distance as fast as they could. When Shinjiro knocked at their door, a week after that episode, it was with a smile and a full teapot. I can see the first islands on the horizon. The search won't be too long, I think. They seem livable on the southern side already. We're almost there. Chapter 35, The Place Under the Sun. What Shinjiro had said was true. They passed a few islands. Low islands, for most of them, and a few volcanic ones. Naruto still didn't know if Anko had suggested this area randomly or not, but he couldn't deny that they ended up passing a few places zone that could work. They were far enough that they could just pick the first island that really fit all the conditions they had agreed on. Compared to the open North Sea, this part of the world was filled with unpredictable waves. If there had been more ships around this area, and if they had managed to pass the sea monster, Naruto knew that a fair amount of them would be littering the sea floor. The wind was blowing from the south, pushing them along. The waves were swelling, surging, making their ship jerk. Nobody was staying on the deck, either staying in the cabin, puking, Karen, or staying in the quarterdeck, the others. Even there, the waves rose high, smashing against the windows. Naruto went to join Karen, rather than leaving her entirely alone. Definitely not because he felt like throwing up himself. Sakura looked at the sea in bewilderment. It felt as though the ship were trying to fight an angry god. With no hope. The wind was coming from the opposite direction, now. A hard wind, too, so they had put the sails away and were relying only on the propeller system, for now. Then the conditions somehow got worse. The wind increased in intensity, and the waves became steeper. She couldn't see anything past 1 kilometer, at most. If there had been somewhere they could stop, she knew that they would have done so. She gripped the rail so hard her hand turned white. They were only hundreds of kilometers away. She heard the wave before she saw it, and it was a sound she would likely not forget. The wave roared like a hungry predator, a wall of water. She turned her head as it hit. Suddenly, she was underwater. Up was down, and down was up. Did a window break? The Kyujira had turned over. The sailors were yelling something. They were sinking, then. She was not sure what she felt, but she knew she had to do something. She cleared her mind as much as she could in this situation. She anchored herself to the boat with chakra, close to the hole in the wall of the quarterdeck. Rat. Ox. Dragon. Ram. Hare. Ox. Dog. Monkey. Boar. Ox. Rat. Ox. Horse. Bird. Dog. Dog. Water style, repulsion wave. She poured all she had in the technique. The ship turned underwater, a full rotation. It righted itself and broke the surface again. She used a second jutsu to guide most of the water outside of the quarterdeck. The sailors looked on in amazement, as she sat down, exhausted. "We're not going down." Takeo let out. The sails had been damaged due to the turn, even though they had been put away, and they would be useless for a while, but the boat was running. 5 minutes later, once it was safer to move, Naruto arrived, a white-faced Karen in tow. Karen blocked the windows entirely, before resuming puking in a bag. Naruto looked thoroughly shaken. Sakura was too, but somebody had to look after the rest of them. Waves crashed, and they kept on going. There was no other way. The sea calmed down progressively. Islands became more numerous. They ran at full speed for the next 40 hours, ignoring most of them. There was a huge archipelago, composed of 9 volcanic islands, to the northeast. Naruto stared. It was about 600 kilometers wide. It looked very green, wild even. The climate was mild to warm, subtropical. Their boat was damaged, sure. But this was better than he had even hoped. Naruto knew this was the place. They anchored the boat on the southernmost sand beach. All of them set foot on the sand. Naruto expected to feel relief at the feeling of solid ground. Instead, he felt sicker than he had in months. He had gotten used to the constant rolling and churning of the ocean. Having it disappear suddenly. He vomited. Karen used an earth jutsu to raise stone from the ground. She shaped it into something that could pass for a house. Then she created a second one. She could have made it permanent, but there was no point to that right now. They slept there. Tomorrow, they'd explore the archipelago. 8 clones were summoned to explore, each was attributed an island. They dispelled hours later and the crew of 6 established a rough map. The islands were very close together, with less than 20 kilometers in between most of them. They were surrounded by mountain ranges, the highest summit reaching more than 2,000 meters above sea level. It was a beautiful place. The central island was the largest, so that's where they would start building the main hub. So? Naruto asked. What's the name? Karen finished. They smiled at each other. Who's going to name it? Hizo wondered. Well, all of us, let's agree on something. Sakura shrugged. We will be starting a village here. Naruto said. We've got somebody helping us with it, and I think we might be able to pull it off with him involved. A village? For real? Shinjiro asked. I thought. Never mind. He nodded. Yeah, we've got a way to move from here to the mainland in a blink. Considering they were supposed to wipe their memories anyway. It didn't matter how much he told them, he figured. But the more he thought about the idea, the more unpalatable it seemed to him. They had spent months together, and the only reason they had made it here was because of the sailor crew. This wouldn't do. Maybe Orochimaru would complain about his moral weakness, but he couldn't abide by that. If they agreed to it, the most he would accept would be wiping the exact position of the islands from their memories. If that. Instead. What would you guys think about moving here permanently? He asked. We'd have a need for guys like you, lots of things we need to do. The three of them looked at each other. It's a bit early for us to say that, but we will think about it. I mean, I will, at least. Can't speak for them. Shinjiro said. There was not much keeping them on the mainland at this point, though, and all of them knew it. Well, no matter what, that makes you the first citizens of this land. It's not much, right now, for sure. Naruto laughed, gesturing at the empty land. But you're free to come at any time and help us decide on a name. In the end, they settled on a name. Umagakur, the village hidden in the sea. Karen built a circle of stones on the main island, using earth jutsu. She made it a permanent fixture. Well, I think it's time to go. Are you sure your portal is going to work, Sakura? Naruto asked. She nodded, marking the floor. A portal to the mountain's graveyard's small town appeared. Naruto drew his own marks back. Then he set the first thunder gate in the center of the stone circle. He and Karen set it to become permanent. I think we can go, then. Sakura said. Just like that, they walked through the portal, and back to the mainland. The first thing Naruto did when coming back was put a permanent mark somewhere close to the village. It wouldn't do to stay trapped on the island because he forgot. Somehow, Orochimaru knew they arrived. One single day later, he came to meet all six of them, Anko in tow. He took a look at their satisfied faces. So you've managed. He laughed with delight. We did. Naruto answered. Did everything go smoothly? There were a couple difficulties on the trip, let's say. It was a bit rougher than expected. But we found a good choice for an island. Very good. Now then. Orochimaru turned to the sailors, who took a step back. Shall I proceed to erase their memories? Wait. Orochimaru turned to him, only somewhat surprised. I had a feeling this would happen. They agreed to get rid of their memories of the exact position, and the general direction. Orochimaru sighed. This would be way more complicated to manage. I see. You did well on getting there, so I'm willing to compromise. So did you manage to find a way for people to use the Thunder Gates, in the end? Orochimaru answered wryly. Well, of course. I did tell you that I would, didn't I? Is it workable? And working? The man shrugged. Yes. There are drawbacks, though. I came up with a design that allows one to make use of the entire relay. Meaning that once applied, they can use all of your marks. I didn't find a way around that. Naruto thought. This was a bit annoying, but not too problematic. He had never been planning on marking anything personal anyway. What else? It also takes a lot of chakra to power. It's especially problematic in the case of civilians, who simply won't be able to make any use of it. Ah. This could be a problem. Yes. We shall start only with shinobi until I find a way around that. Naruto thought. Would using natural energy work? Yes, it would. Orochimaru nodded, before shrugging. I have worked on a way to use it in a seal, with Yugo, back then. Naruto winced at the reminder. Once more, he wondered if Teiwa was alive. Well, Orochimaru had said nothing about her, so likely she was. Another time. The man continued. But it was somewhat unstable and came with many other problems. And if I told you we have a reliable way to convert a seal using human chakra to work with external, natural energy instead? Orochimaru stared at him a bit too intensely for him to feel at ease. Creep. Well. Then I would tell you we have our solution. Anko volunteered to try it out first. They waited with bated breath as Orochimaru applied his seal, and motioned for Naruto to put the mark on her. This will complete the seal. The way I structured it, it won't make her a destination, which doesn't work on moving objects anyway. Instead, it will make her able to tap into the network of gates. Naruto did so. The golden mark appeared on her shoulder. Anko winked at them, focused, before disappearing in a crack of thunder. They waited. Did anything go wrong? She appeared again, with another cracking sound. Did I scare you guys? She laughed. It's working. Naruto said, mouth hanging. Yes. Orochimaru nodded, as he had expected it. Ah, there's one thing. Anko said. The seal only stores a certain amount immediately. After 2 jumps, it needs to be refilled, and it seems to take way longer. Orochimaru measured the rate, with Karin. They made a few quick calculations. About 2 jumps per day is the current maximum. Is their final conclusion. Well, if you guys are ready, we'll mark all of you. There are no drawbacks. Naruto said to the sailors, who still seem wary of Orochimaru. Nothing we can do to you with these seals. Well, you'll have a golden tattoo somewhere on your body, but that's it. He went for it first. He didn't really need it, but if it allowed him to save a little bit of chakra at no cost. Plus it seemed to help convince the sailors. The seal worked for them too, they discovered. Something else that Naruto would only realize later is that only people with the mark or carried by him, and him only could reach here. Bringing outsiders in wouldn't work for anybody other than him. A back and forth trip later to try it out, and they made their goodbyes. They would likely come to the island at some point, Naruto thought, at least, but there were things they needed to do first, no matter what. Naruto, Sakura, and Karin bowed to them, thanking them for their help. Once everybody was marked, they jumped to the island. Orochimaru took a long glance around, no doubt planning what could go where, the best way to work the land, and establish defensive barriers. He looked back at the trio, satisfied. Good job, all 3 of you. He nodded. Naruto smiled, proud of what they had already managed. Sakura-san, your contract is now over. He handed her a scroll, which likely contained the rest of the money. You've been a great help, so I won't propose to erase your memories. Orochimaru laughed at the look Naruto gave him. Let us keep in contact. In the future, I may need someone with your unique skills. Sakura nodded. She then took a look at Naruto, Karin, then the island. Actually, if none of you minds. She started, a bit hesitant. I would love to settle here. Or just keep a small dash. Naruto laughed, pulling her into a one-armed hug. Ah. I guess that's fine then. She laughed, trying to get rid of him. They started building as soon as they decided on a few things. The easiest way to get around would be to mark all 9 islands. It turned out that a single leap could take you to any point, but you would necessarily pass through the main gate first. It made no real difference in practical terms, as it was only a few seconds more anyway. Space was no problem here, so they decided to start by constructing the first 2 buildings away from the main island, settling around a crater lake on the eastern island, at around 500 meters of altitude. The vegetation was pretty dense, and the crater was covered in some forest. Between the crater wall and the lake was a sandy beach. Small birds flew around it, settling in trees. On the northern side of the lake, Orochimaru slowly crafted a spire of stone, with Anko's help. Nobody was very surprised. He seemed the type to build a tower. Naruto shrugged, looking at Karin and Sakura. So, you guys want to build something together, all 3 of us? Sure. Sakura shrugged, looking too casual. I'd love to. Karin grinned. They got started. Naruto couldn't use Earth Release, so it was mostly Karen taking care of summoning a stone house. Sakura did have a slight affinity for earth, so she took care of shaping it more intricately. Naruto summoned several clones and started to work on the seals they would need to make this livable. And considering they were on an island, thousands of kilometers away from the rest of the world, there would be many things. Luckily, he had gotten a little bit of practice over the years. After one full day of work, their 3-floor house actually looked like a house. At least from the outside. On the other side of the lake, Orochimaru's smooth, massive spire looked too grandiose. They were pretty happy about the result, so they called it a day and went to sleep. They didn't have any sort of bedding. Sleeping bags it would be, then. Naruto could use the Thunder Gates several times a day, without too much trouble. Part of it was that they were based on his chakra, part of it was he was just working with much more than most people. So the next day, he jumped straight to the mainland, arriving back at Mountain's graveyard. He definitely would need to put more marks around the continent. There was nothing here. Waterfall and Rice were at about the same distance. He decided on heading to Rice first, maybe for nostalgia's sake. He focused his chakra, wind first, then lightning, pushing off in a burst of speed. He noticed just how natural the jutsu felt, by now. Using 2 nature changes at the same time used to feel difficult, but now. He wondered if this was about his seals, or if he was just getting more and more used to it. All the while, he was ascending at a high speed, a blur of blue energy. The episode with the sea creature had reminded him there was no need for him to risk his own life unnecessarily. And Akatsuki might be keeping watch of Orochimaru's old hideout. He created 3 shadow clones. They would disguise themselves when close. Then all of them transformed into birds, gliding toward the land of Rice. The clones would fly down to Mukage, while he continued toward Hiraji. The city was as crowded as ever. After months of being in close quarters with a grand total of 5 others, he felt a bit grumpy when he had to move around others. There were a few things he and his new roommates would need. So, gallons of paint, ceramic tiles, glass windows, and furniture for 3 people living in a 3-story house, as well as 2 tons of wood. That's right. Are you sure you can afford it? Naruto sighed. Yeah. Well. Can you tell me more about the layout of the house, at least? Sure. He put a permanent mark close to the city, up in the mountains before leaving, a few scrolls worth of material on him. He appeared straight near their house, passing through the main gate. Orochimaru had started building more houses, it seemed. They were on the main island, in a segmented circle that spread around the main gate. So Orochimaru actually knows urban planning. He chuckled. He was not fully surprised. The man seemed to have dabbled with every single thing that caught his interest. Naruto appeared in the stone circle in the middle of the lake, dashing off toward his home. There, Sakura and Karen were sitting on the sand, feet in the water. They waved hello to him. He settled down. Brought you some food. Naruto said, unsealing one of the scrolls. I could kiss you. Sakura said. Next time on you, instead. She snorted a laugh. They ate, joked around, and generally did not progress much when it came to working on the house. Later on, when they actually started to, was the time Orochimaru chose to pop in, already thinking ahead. He spoke. There's tension on the horizon. It is time we do some recruiting. I have a few people in mind. Chapter 36, The Village Hidden in the Sea. My, you really always have something for us. Naruto muttered. And here I had hoped to take some time off. Orochimaru waved it off. Sure, you could. Akatsuki won't kill itself, though. Naruto sighed. What a killjoy. Right. You got any leads? The man looked smug. Yes. I have, indeed. They are ready to come as is. All that's left to do is for us to mark them. I will continue to do so from the shadows, until your own reputation grows to the point where you can do it yourself. You've been busy, then. Did you doubt it? Orochimaru asked, amused. I thought you'd be too busy taking this hidden guy apart. Not yet, no. He's currently in my dungeon. You have a dungeon. Why else would I have built this spire? He said, pointing at the tower. Because you're a megalomaniac. Orochimaru threw his head back and laughed. Oh my. Ever the funny one, aren't you? Naruto sighed. Let's get started, then. He looked at Karen and Sakura, who do their best to look busy. He sighed again. Well, take care of building the house, then. Sure. Will do. The way the relay of gates worked was pretty straightforward. Once a mark was placed, every single person connected to the relay felt where its approximate position was, and could jump to it, no matter if they had been there before or not. Naruto and Orochimaru appeared in the land of rice. Where is Anko? Naruto asked, only now noticing he hadn't seen her. Doing the exact same thing we're doing. Ah, recruiting, then. He said with a nod. There are plenty of roles we need to fill. We have no economy, right now. Nothing we produce, nothing to export, either. True. There are a few seal designs I could start selling. Any jobs we need in particular? Anything. From embroidery, textile weaving, sewing, ceramics, construction workers, engineers, farmers, food producers, restaurants, administration, medics, researchers. So. Everything. Plus ninja. We'll start there. Is this where we meet them, then? Naruto asked. I found that hiding in plain sight was the easiest solution, this time. The duo was standing in front of a crowded tea shop. Hello. A woman, around 20, greeted them at the door. Would you like a seat? Orochimaru smiled a soft, kind smile. It looked so out of place on his face that Naruto wanted to laugh. Yes, thank you, my dear. We are meeting a few friends of ours. They could be here already. Of course. Do you know which table they booked? She asked, smiling as well. I think. Could it be the reed table? He pretended not to remember. Oh. Then they are here already. Could you guide us there? He smiled, once more, eyes crinkling. Absolutely. She turned around to go. Naruto just gave Orochimaru a very flat look. What is this about? He mouthed. Politeness. Is what he gets back. He rolled his eyes. That was probably the way the snake sage got his kicks. The table in the upper left corner was crowded. 16 people were waiting, all of them observing Orochimaru as he came up the stairs. Naruto recognized a few of them. Once the waitress was gone, a few of them bowed. Orochimaru-sama. I'm glad to see you all alive. He simply said, by way of greeting. Not all of us escaped. A bald man with a scar over his right eye said. I know already, Jigamo. A man sighed. We knew the risks, though. That was Arashi, if Naruto remembered well. We won't let this happen again. We are building a new, safer base of operations. Orochimaru answered. What's preventing that teleporting man from doing the exact same thing? A girl with orange hair asked. He won't be able to find us. Naruto said. Who are you to say this? You're just Orochimaru's disciple. Someone else said, arms folded. It's in a remote place. A very remote island. Nobody ever went there before. And we'll hide it even better. No one said anything. They were all natives to the land of rice. Most of them came from the Shiin, Fuma, or Nagai clan. But it seemed like the world was about to turn upon itself once more. The Third War had been terrible for the land of rice, as they had been in between 3 warring nations, and endured a lot of collateral damage. We won't involve the people in the other nations' wars. Naruto continued. But if you chose to, that's your personal choice, we won't prevent you from doing so either. I will fight, myself. What about that masked man? Another woman, with dark brown hair, frowned. He killed several of us. We have reason to believe he's with Akatsuki, an organization that works for the current leader of Rain, from the shadows. These people, we're willing to fight against. Good. She nodded. Most of them seemed to agree. Orochimaru smiled. Come with us, and we'll bring you there. Orochimaru seemed to be in a good mood, Naruto noticed, once they had sent the first group to UMI. Like the people who would come after them, they would be expected to keep Naruto's identity a secret to village outsiders. Happy? It seems it went pretty smoothly inside there, he said. Nothing is ever as easy as convincing someone who already wants what you're offering, he simply said. These people want respite from the other nation's warring games, and revenge from the man who killed some of their family members and friends. We're giving them exactly that. Naruto grimaced. You always make anything sound pretty cynical. Orochimaru laughed. Certainly. And what's more, is that they will bring their own clans and friends in. Most clans in the Land of Rice are entirely independent from the daimyo, for historical reasons. Ah. So that's how you intend to kickstart an economy. Naruto realized. That's the way Konoha and the villages that followed its example did at first, yes. Speaking of Konoha, aren't you worried? Worried? What about? It's been years since I last depended on Konoha for anything. There are people I care for there, certainly. But they don't need me, they're strong enough on their own. Orochimaru shrugged. Besides, I don't think the Hokage will do anything, at all. Why not? Konoha, just like any village, always had somebody take the fall for the things they could not afford to do openly. By taking care of Akatsuki, we're removing a big thorn from Konoha and the world's foot. It just so happens our interests are aligned. Naruto laughed. Nice way of putting it. Recruiting civilians seemed to come naturally to Orochimaru, and Naruto learned a few things about persuasion. But most of the time, the simple promise of less taxes, less meddling and administration seemed to be enough to entice them. Dangling the carrot that they would be among the first arrived, when land was still dirt cheap, and the competition low. It almost felt unfair. Well, that was a productive day. Orochimaru chuckled. Indeed. At this rate, and with a few jutsu to help crops grow faster, we should be self-sufficient in no time. Good. I'll start producing and selling a few seals I devised to other countries. Nothing that could come back to bite us in the ass, of course. Why just the seals? Huh. Working with artisans, you could sell the completed product with higher margins. That's true. He never had thought of it. Between clones and actual people, we should be able to get some decent returns. Very nice to see such entrepreneurial spirit. Orochimaru laughed. We can't all spend most of our time dissecting corpses in our wizard tower, he said with a bit of distaste. Orochimaru shrugged. Dead people are dead. They might as well be of some use for us. I know it's not for everyone though, it takes some moral flexibility. Naruto snorted. Since when do you make jokes? Since when do you understand them? Orochimaru quipped back. He couldn't help but laugh. Orochimaru smiled, too. You did all this today? Naruto asked, blinking in surprise. Where there had been an admittedly pretty bare-bones house before, stood a minimalistic, dignified, and beautiful structure. A curvy, elongated, green roof covered each floor, protecting the windows from the rain. Indoors, sliding doors made of wood and rice paper allowed light to shine through. The stone floor was covered by tatami made of rice straw with cloth edges. A pleasant smell wafted in the air. Outside, the ingawa veranda that resembled a porch were found on every level, bringing together the inside of the house with the outside. Sakura tried not to look too smug, staring at her fingernails. Oh, so you like it, then? Yeah. I do. Karen grinned. Knew it. We still need to do something about the humidity indoors. Stone was easier to use, since we can just use earth jutsu, but it's not as good as wood for ventilation and dash. I'll take care of it. Naruto waved off. Great job, both of you. Sakura looked away, flustered. Well, if I'm going to be living there. Karen grinned. Ah, she's being shy. Fuck off, Karen. There was no heat in her words, though. Karen laughed. There are people starting to settle on the main island. I'm going there. You guys wanna help, too, or had enough. They looked at each other, and stood up. It was a nice warm-up. Karen said. Let's see what we can do. Shinjiro was among the people who came that day. Shinjiro. Naruto called. I didn't expect you to come back so soon. The man laughed, before shrugging. Me neither, to be fair. But I don't have any family, no real ties to the land of Earth. So I figured I'd join up. Besides, the pay's good, according to that creepy snake man. Naruto laughed. He's a strange man, for sure. Welcome to your new home, then. He looked around. You don't have a home yet, do you? Nah. Well, pick a place and we'll get you a place to sleep by tonight. The man raised his eyebrows. You mean, like an inn? Or something like that? Naruto laughed. No, not exactly. Shinjiro's face when the three of them create a bare-bone house near the sea out of stone in less than an hour is worth 1,000 pictures. And it's mine. Yeah. Naruto nodded. For free. Well, you'll pay a tax on your income and a tax for living there. That's it. For the first settlers. I think so, yeah. But Orochimaru only takes in people who he thinks will be useful for UMI anyway. Naruto shrugged. You're a great sailor, and a good cook, too. I don't think you'll have any trouble. I see. Okay. You can decorate your house however you see fit, that's on you, though. Shinjiro laughed. I wouldn't expect anything else. I'll need to talk to Takea and Hizo about this. I don't have any mark in IWA as of now, though. Shinjiro shrugged. I'll send a letter, the old-fashioned way. Plus they can also come here on their own, now. Yup. Did you guys get the Kyujira back? Kyujira? Ah, the boat? No. Naruto said sheepishly. We kinda forgot about it, what with the preparations and all. It's still on the southern island. The man sighed, amused. Ah, well. I'll start by fixing it up by tomorrow, then. Sure thing. How do I get there? Teleport or run across the WA dash, Naruto thought. Ah, yes, either might not be too convenient for a civilian. Well, I think I have a business idea, then. Shinjiro laughed. Naruto woke up during the night. There was somebody at his door. By now, he's decent enough at sensing to know that it's Karen, despite not seeing her face. Do you mind if I sleep with you tonight? She asked. He blinked. They had separate rooms, now. All of them soundproof and furnished and... Well. Who was he to refuse his best friend? I don't mind. He smiled. Come here. He felt her smile. Let me get a pair of pants, though. He added. She said nothing. He put them on, feeling a pair of eyes on him. If it were anybody other than Karen, he would probably think she was interested. There's no denying that Karen is beautiful, smart, kind and... Luckily, they knew better than to risk their friendship just because they're attracted to each other. Since he woke up before Sakura and Karen, as he usually did now that he needed less sleep, he went outside. Orochimaru was somewhere else this morning, no doubt either recruiting people, or recruiting people to recruit people. He was as slick of a manipulator as he had ever seen, if he were honest with himself. And the worst part was that he never really bothered to lie. Just told people the truth about his plans, likely the part that they wanted to hear, and let them convince themselves that his way was the best way to get what they truly desired. Impressive. Truly impressive. He knew that some of it was starting to rub off on him, too. And he had the feeling that was the man's goal. He didn't seem like someone who'd constantly want to be running things, preferring to experiment, study and dissect the world around him. He sighed. When had he started to actually like this immoral snake? Naruto really enjoyed the early mornings, by now, something that he remembered he used to hate, in the past. The orange skies behind the mountains, the smell of the sea. It almost made him nostalgic, for something he was sure he had never experienced himself. It was time to practice. The westernmost island was pretty bare, being covered in nothing but rocks and sand. Nobody lived there. That was where he would be going. He could have teleported, sure, but he enjoyed the feeling of taking to the skies more. Lightning and wind coursed through his body at the same time. He didn't even bother summoning them one after the other, by now. He pushed himself off the ground. It wasn't an impression, it really came to him easier and easier every time. This time, at the peak of his jump, he didn't release the technique. Lightning is frenetic energy, wanting to strike something, but it would settle for someone too. Wind is freedom, going around any obstacles it meets, to go wherever it feels like. Lightning is strength. It is pure power, and can be used to destroy, or to protect. Wind is freedom. Detachment from worldly problems and concerns. But all the same, lightning, when forcibly contained with pure strength, and given no free will not spark at all. Wind, when channeled with complete freedom, no control, will tear a man apart before it resumes its course. Naruto understood it. Really understood it for the first time. He let go. He took control. It was all the same, in the end. Naruto felt cannon burn along his spine. Susanoo no Mikoto did too. For an instant, he can almost feel their two spirits, the way they are described in Uzumaki Sujin's scrolls. Cannon, full of mercy. Harmony. Susanoo. A raging storm. Good. Evil. Both lightning and wind flashed purple around him, and instead of falling, he was accelerating through the sky, almost horizontally. From below, he must likely look like a purple, human-sized comet, he thought. Naruto overshot his first destination, the central island. He also overshot the western island by almost 2 kilometers, managing to land himself into the sea. If he had to describe this landing, smashing into a brick wall would fit. Once he figured which way was up, and which way was down, he managed to get himself to the surface using wind harder to reach in the ocean, apparently to propel himself. He limped back to the desert island and sat down to gather his jumbled thoughts. Kumo has people who use lightning and water together, as storm release. But, despite the seals he felt lighting up, especially Susanoo no Mikoto, this was not storm release. There were definitely no energy beams, no blinding blue light. No water element involved. No, this was something else. And if he were honest, not something he could afford to use right now. The only reason he was even alive was that whatever this combination was, it shielded him from the impact. Water at this height would have killed a normal person. If it had been solid ground, he didn't think he would have survived. For once, he didn't feel like giving it a name, or experimenting with it more. His control over wind and lightning was still lacking. He would have to master both of them, first. He summoned an army of clones and got back to practice. Orochimaru was multitasking. Not in the classical sense, as he knew it would be a waste. Different tasks could be done more efficiently if he just did them one after the other. But considering he had a few clones on the mainland, scouring the land of rice and neighboring countries for information about the whereabouts of the people who had been living in the camp with them over the last years. A few more clones taking care of the more administrative parts of handling a new village, and he couldn't wait to find someone else to handle these parts. And 2 others were building, refining buildings and planning an efficient city. All the while his real body kept up with his training. Akatsuki would strike, at some point. Well, considering all of that, he thought it was fair to call this multitasking. Once the sun was up, Sakura was up too. Now that they had completed their first objective, reaching the island, they would need to prepare. The Akatsuki would come after Naruto. It would come after Sasuke. Between the two, strangely enough, Naruto was the one in the safest place. They didn't know he was alive, and even if they did, they wouldn't know where to find him. As long as he didn't get himself into trouble, leading to his capture on the mainland. Which she knew could happen. There were still so many reasons for him to go back. He would go to Konoha, she knew. He apparently had to locate something in his late father's safe house. He would want answers from the third. He would likely want to see some of his old friends, even if they didn't know who he was. And he would likely want to see Ino, even if he never said so explicitly. Also, there was also the simple fact that he was the only one able to put more gates through the mainland. For this reason alone, he would have to walk the world. She wasn't about to let him go alone. And maybe, just maybe, she could convince her stubborn parents that Konoha was likely going to get involved in another war soon. That they could come with her. It would not be the same, there was too much water under this particular bridge, but they would at least live. On top of the villages, there was the possibility that Akatsuki was planning for world domination. How many top-level members did they have within their ranks? 10? 20? 30? Nobody knew exactly. But all of them would be around S rank. She was likely getting close to A rank by now. At most. But she relied mostly on the effect of surprise. Between her ability to mask her chakra, decent skill with genjutsu despite her lacking a teacher for years, her speed, and the deadly chakra blade she could extend from her hand, she was a good assassin. And her portals made for the perfect escape plan. In a straight battle, against monsters who could throw around ninjutsu the kind that would leave her winded after a single use all day long. That was not enough. Her biggest strength was her chakra control. Her reserves would likely never become something out of the ordinary. It only made sense for her to focus on what she could use. After all, hard work and incredibly fine chakra control had been the two reasons the fourth Hokage had been able to become the legend he was. Hiraishin was just the cherry on top, one that he would not have been able to use without the two aforementioned attributes. If speed and chakra control had been enough for him, it would be enough for her. Day after day, she refined her edge. Chapter 37, The Relay. Karen stared at the ceiling. Things hadn't been so confusing for a long time. In Kusa, things had been terrible, but simple. Let people bite you, heal them. They had never seen her more than a tool. And she knew she had been lucky enough to leave before puberty, because they would not have hesitated to abuse her in more ways than they did when she was a mere child. With Orochimaru, she had been given purpose. Assisting him in his research with immortality, as well as whatever tasks he could delegate to her. She wasn't stupid, or naive. Orochimaru, while not being the complete monster he was known as outside of Fire Nation, was pretty far from being a morally upstanding citizen. He saw her as useful, and so treated her well, protected her, and she had never minded the rest. Besides, a rigid hierarchy was the only thing she knew from life. Kusa had taught her that people lower on the totem pole were treated worse than those above. It only made sense to climb. As cynical as it was, the ninja world as a whole was no different. Leaf could hide it, but she had seen the poorer districts, and it was a far cry from the clan compounds. And while Karen knew that finding your worth through being useful to other people was a terrible idea, she was still learning how that worked, exactly. Even now, she was trying to find goals of her own. Something that wasn't just helping other people accomplishing their own. She would have to get stronger, in order to help with the Akatsuki situation, of course. They would come after her best friend. And they would kill Sasuke, too, who was someone she cared about, even though it had been years. But after this, she would need to find something. If they didn't mind, she would love to continue traveling the world with Naruto and Sakura. It had been dangerous, certainly. It would probably be even more so in the future. But it had been the best time in her short life, as of yet. And Naruto? Naruto was different. She had no doubt that even he would come to understand that some form of hierarchy was needed, considering his goals, but she knew it would be tempered by his nature. But here was someone her age, that she could talk with, was kind to her and was not expecting anything from her. The same thing had happened for her with Sakura. She hoped he would not change too much from whatever the world would throw at them. Because she was afraid that she would stay at his side, even then. She had been lonely before she met him. And she had been lonely when she met him again, even though it had been less obvious. She cared about him. Probably more than he understood. And, he cared about her. So much that she had trouble wrapping her head around it. She was attracted to him, of course, but physical attraction was just one thing. Now that the seals were amplifying the desire that was already there. It was becoming hard to believe she only saw him the way she saw Sakura. So, sure, she cared about him, and sure she found him very attractive, and sure she wanted to stay by his side, but… ah. Shit. She was in love with Naruto, wasn't she? It was easy to forget that Orochimaru was one of the strongest shinobi in the world. The man was so sure of his ability that he rarely had to remind people of it. And his reputation did most of the heavy lifting on its own. But here was a man who had mastered all 5 basic nature transformations, along with yin and yang release, was extremely skilled in fuinjutsu, kinjutsu, and senjutsu. He apparently had a silver tongue, a talent for politics when he bothered, and his sharp mind was obvious to anybody who spoke with him. For these reasons, Naruto sometimes forgot that he was a master of kinjutsu. Sarutobi was great at it. He had taught him the basics, and brought him to a very solid level. Orochimaru was simply better. He had pushed Naruto beyond what he thought was possible with a sword, a staff, a spear, a naginata, or even a bow. He probably was the man with the greatest, widest arsenal of jutsu and knowledge alive, equaling or having overtaken Sarutobi. So usually, when he spoke, Naruto listened. "A marker near every major city?" he asked. Orochimaru nodded, as if he hadn't asked him to walk around the entire elemental countries. "Ah, come on. I just settled from the most painful boat trip of my life." The man shrugged. "I know. I would do it myself if I could. But you're the only one who can actually add more marks to the network." That was true. Naruto said nothing. "Besides, you have the chakra capacity to go back and forth easily. There's no reason you can't come back here every night." How he hated the reasonable arguments he made. "What will you be doing meanwhile?" Orochimaru seemed amused. He knew he had him. "Oh, simply making sure our little village grows in the right direction. By the way, we'll mark more people to join in a few days. I will tell you when." Naruto grumbled. He knew it just made perfect sense for him, since he was the only one who could mark places, or people. "I'll ask Sakura to come with me," Naruto decided. "We'll be able to cover more ground with her portals." Orochimaru sighed. "You just want me to pay the girl, don't you?" "Very well, it will be done." Naruto grinned. "That's just a bonus. And I might as well take Karen, too, while we're at it. She's not on your personal bankroll anyway. Do as you please. Both of you are strong enough, by now." Naruto gave him a nod, and turned to walk away. "Oh, by the way," Orochimaru said. "I have a feeling I won't like it." "Yes. Could you deliver this to the Hokage?" He handed him a scroll. "I wasn't intending on setting foot in Konoha." Conflicted feelings rose within him. "Well, now you are. Another matter is settled. Sarutobi would know who I am for sure. If he didn't tell anybody about your identity before, including me, I don't think he is ever going to. That would open another can of worms he probably doesn't want to deal with." Naruto sighed. "Do you really need me to do this?" "Yes." Orochimaru looked at him seriously. "You will find out why it has to be you when you give it to him. Konoha. Ino. Suzuki. Toru. Kakashi. Konohamaru. Biwako. Sarutobi." There were many things he wanted answers to. Some he didn't. At least he had the benefit of not being recognizable, to most people. "Very well. I accept." "Thank you." Naruto found the 2 young women sparring again. Looking at the lakeside house, he found that he could get used to living here like that. "Sorry to interrupt, girls. Prepare your travel packs, we're leaving for the continent tomorrow morning." "Huh? Why?" Karen asked, scrunching her face. "To put gates everywhere, basically. Apparently Orochimaru has a few people he wants us to get, too." "Is he going to pay me?" Sakura asked. He threw her a scroll, which she caught and unfurled. She whistled. "All right, I'm coming. And you call me greedy." "What was that?" She put a hand to her ear. "Can't hear you over the sounds of my pockets lining up with fine gold." "Does he need all of us for that?" Karen asked. "Well, no. You don't have to come, actually. I just kinda wanted you to." Naruto said sheepishly. Karen looked surprised. Okay, can you take care of our little house, then? We'll probably drop by to sleep here most nights. No. I'm coming. But you said dash. I'm coming. That's what I said. She nodded quickly. He shrugged. I still need to prepare a few seals for mass production before anything, so see you later tonight. The next morning, Naruto grabbed each girl's shoulder. There was no point in having them use natural energy, when his own chakra would refill faster anyway. They appeared in the south of the land of rice, close to the border with the land of iron which was south of Mountain's graveyard. There was only one major city in rice they hadn't marked yet, so the plan was simple. Okay, so once you get there, Naruto said, addressing Sakura. Open a gate, then jump to our position once I drop a mark. Open the second gate there, and I will come with you to put a permanent gate there. Simple enough. She nodded. After that, I'll be heading to the land of hot water, before going up north, to frost. Then lightning. Naruto nodded. We're going west, to waterfall, before going into the land of earth. Probably better to do it as fast as possible, rumor has it the tensions are growing between Iwa and Konoha. Karen added. Sounds like a plan. Same thing goes for mist and wind, though, doesn't it? Sakura thought aloud. Yeah. Naruto nodded. Maybe we can do lightning later, then. All right. Be careful, Sakura. She laughed. I will. See you guys later today. Sakura left with a wink. Naruto turned to Karen. Now that Sakura's gone. Why, yes. She said, nervous for some reason. Do you know any mobility techniques? Ah. Okay. No, I don't. She sighed. Put me down. Karen screamed, as they soared above the trees, Naruto's legs shrouded in lightning. Are you sure right now is a good moment? He shouted back, looking over his shoulder, where Karen was currently grabbing onto his neck for dear life. He was, amused. No, She screamed again as they started falling. What the hell had she been thinking, accepting his offer to give her a piggyback ride? She had thought it could be a nice, cute moment. Instead they were falling to their death. Oh please no, non-dash dot. Naruto focused more wind chakra under his feet, slowing down their fall at the latest possible moment. They touched the floor slowly, and she dared hope for a moment. Lightning crackled and they were ascending again. Ah! Karen screamed again, as they leaped even higher. She only started to accept her fate after the fourth jump. Never again. Karen said, once they stopped. You don't like being up in the sky? Naruto asked, actually surprised. He had thought it was just the surprise of the first jump. Hell no. I love the sea, and solid ground even more. She said, leaning against a tree for balance. Ah. Sorry, then. He said, contrite. No. I mean. Don't be. She said, trying to look strong. I'm a big girl, I can take it. He shot her a doubtful look. Okay. You don't have to pretend because you're afraid of slowing me down. She deflated. I can always make time for you. He smiled, and she grinned too. Let's go with the body flicker, then. We're close to the land of canyons. Waterfall is not too far away now. Sure thing. He grinned. Catch me if you can. Naruto blurred away. Oh, you ass dash. She hurried after him, but she couldn't stop herself from grinning too. As the name indicated, the land of canyons was mostly made out of canyons. There were gorges too, of course, deep ravines with water flowing through it, and many without any river at all. These steep cliffs were formed by frequent erosion at the plateau level. These big empty rocky fields made for the perfect terrain for shinobi to jump around. Even if they missed a jump, these platforms were so wide that they could simply grab on the cliffside and climb back up. There was only one major city in the land of canyons, besides Waterfall, and it would be their second destination. Naruto and Karen raced to get to the village of Waterfall, full speed ahead. They slowed down once they got closer, not willing to risk being seen as enemies. It was pretty easy to find, even for Naruto's pretty average sensing skills. They just had to locate the plateau with waterfalls coming out of it, and then look for the waterfall standing between them and a high chakra concentration. He arrived at the cliff overlooking the plateau before she did. It was a nice warm-up. She arrived entirely out of breath. "Guh. You alright? You look a little red in the face." He laughed. "Just need to catch my breath." Karen panted. "Sure, we're close enough. I'll put a mark right here." He did so, before sitting down in full lotus. Now they just had to wait for Sakura to open a gate. She arrived a little while later, no doubt having felt another permanent gate being created. "Did I miss something?" she asked. "Just me destroying Karen." Naruto laughed. Karen said nothing, just focusing on recovering chakra as quickly as she could. "Ready to go?" he asked Sakura. "Me?" She laughed. "I just need you to go, I'm staying here with Karen." He grumbled something vaguely rude in return. It was a quick affair. He went in through the gate, dropped a mark, made it stick, and went back through. The immediate change in landscape and altitude was a bit disconcerting, though, he had to say. "All right, let's eat something." "Here?" Karen asked. "Well, yes. It's a nice landscape." It was true, they had a prime seat over the canyon. "I know you girls are pretty hungry dash," they protested vehemently, and he chuckled. "So I made a few more bento." "Wait. You're the one making them every time?" Sakura asked, surprised. "Huh? Who else? I've been cooking since I was, what, 9, 10. He grumbled. "Biwako taught me." I think she was trying to get out of doing it herself. The old bat. Karen and Sakura shared a look. "Well, here I thought you bought us food from time to time." Karen said. "That's even better. Thank you." She grinned. "Thank you," Sakura said, in earnest. "Ah. Come on. It's nothing," he said, blushing a bit. "I'm sure you're both great cooks yourself." "Not really," Karen admitted. "I just buy meat and roast it." Sakura shrugged. "Well. Okay. I'll do the cooking, then." He paused to think. "With double beef for meat girl." Sakura made a rude gesture at him. He added. "Don't count on me to scrub floorboards, though. I've got something personal against them." Sakura left again. Karen having recovered, they headed north. One more mark to set in the land of canyons today, one more in hot water, and they'd go home. "Are you planning on going to Konoha?" Karen asked, as they used the body flicker at the same time to reach for the next rocky plateau. Naruto looked at her, a wry smile on his face. "Heh, you saw right through me." "Well, it did look like something was on your mind the whole time. Considering you seemed pretty relaxed yesterday before you told us we were going to the continent." She shrugged. "You should become a detective." He grinned. "Only if you become my assistant." She joked back. "You just want me under you." Naruto laughed. He heard no answer, and turned around. "Wow, be careful there. You almost missed your jump, Karen." "Yeah, sorry, I was thinking of something else. Bad time for it." He chuckled. They focused their chakra for a longer body flicker and crossed an entire canyon with the next jump. "Nice one, Karen. It's easier when I'm not running after you." He laughed. "You should get faster, then. We'd avoid the whole dilemma." She scoffed. "I don't have fancy lightning jutsu to make myself run faster, or wind to catch myself if I fall." He's deep in thought. "I think water could work. For catching yourself, I mean. I never tried, to be honest. My dear sensei would scold you for lacking creativity." Naruto tooted. "Lucky he's just the man I work for, and not my teacher, then." "For sure. Naruto." Stop right here. Huh? He questioned, but listened right away. You can try to hide your chakra all you want. Karen yelled. It is way too foul for that. Karen waited. Naruto stood next to her, ready to spring. One woman emerged, behind a lower spire. Naruto gritted his teeth. She was older, taller, and definitely more muscular, but there was no hiding who she was. That mint-colored hair was too unique for that. And so were the alien, orange eyes. Ah. She said, a sharp grin on her tanned face. And here I hoped to surprise you guys. Naruto focused on his link with Sasuke, summoning a dark blade. Karen started to mold water-natured chakra. Don't hesitate, Karen. She won't. Naruto said. Chapter 38, Lucky 7. This brought Naruto back. It would be almost nostalgic, if it weren't for the fact that the last time they had fought had ended up with him almost dying. And the fact that she had killed Shino. At least she wasn't incoherent with rage like she had been last time. Probably because she didn't recognize him. Are you the girl from the exams in Konoha? Fu chirped. I remember you. You beat that guy up good. She laughed. That was me, yes. Karen said, tightly. And you? She turned her eyes to Naruto. There's something familiar about you. He said nothing. If she figured it out, well, that was a guaranteed fight. He started to channel chakra, preparing an emergency jump to a gate, any of them. They could always come back another time. Ah, I know. Fu exclaimed. Komei says there's Kurama's chakra within you. Who's Kurama? She tilted her head, which would have been cute, on someone who was not a cannibalistic murderer. He continued to channel. 10 more seconds should be enough. Karen understood, and was ready to come to him. Oh. You're like me, then. Fu laughed. It has been a long time since I met another. And one of the 9 died, apparently. The boy from Suna. She made a sad face. So it seems. Did you know him? Keep her talking. 7 seconds left. She stared at him, squinting her orange eyes. I know you're trying to stall for time. Komei tells me so. He also told me that Kurama is an ass, but he doesn't deserve to be trapped, either. I don't hold the 9 tails anymore, if that's what you mean. 3 seconds. She laughed. Silly, Komei can feel its chakra inside you. Fu then turned serious. I'll free him, then. Prepare to die. Noxious orange and green chakra surrounded her and she rushed him, at full speed. Damn it. He thought. Fighting it was, then. Karen threw herself away from Naruto, the instant she felt the chakra build up within the girl. From the amount of it, she was either trying to use a long-range jutsu or... No, she was flying straight at him. That's what she did, going straight through the rock, with no sign of slowing down. Naruto used lightning chakra to augment his legs and arms. He waited until the last moment to move forward, his back to Fu. And then he whirled around, 2 hands around his sword, in a deadly half-turn whose aim was to take her head in one single motion. He didn't seem to have his usual qualms about killing, going straight for the head. Naruto would rather deal with his own moral issues than put Karen in danger. Lightning crackled, as his sword glinted blue. Instead of cutting through skin and bone, as he had been ready to do, the sword hit something hard. Fu was sent flying to the ground, bouncing off the rock and recovering in midair. There was some sort of armor on her neck, seemingly made of chitin. Fu smiled, but she didn't seem amused. Komei protects me. You won't get rid of me so easily. I dash. Karen appeared behind her with a body flicker, arms encased in rock. She hit Fu head-on, with a diving punch to the face. Blunt strikes seemed to work decently well. Gah! Fu let out as both of them fell to the ground. A following spinning kick, courtesy of Karen, smashed her face into the floor, where it bounced. Naruto started to weave hand signs. Karen got the signal, and leaped away, readying a technique as well. They didn't to communicate verbally to understand what kind of fight this would be. The kind where you threw everything you had, as soon as there was an opening. Lightning style, Thunder Lance. A spear made of lightning formed in his left hand, buzzing with energy. He jumped up, spun it 3 times, focusing more chakra within it, which made it grow. Once. Twice. Thrice. Once he could barely hold onto it, he hurled it at Fu, causing it to explode violently once it hit her, multiple times. Earth style, Iron Hand Prison. Karen slammed both hands to the ground, raising a dome of sharp rocks around Fu. Ha! She sent a second wave of chakra at it, making the walls tighten. The thunder lance continued to crackle inside it, and the dome shook from its barely contained power. Naruto unsealed his bow. He closed his eyes, focusing on the calm state of mind that he needed to safely use 2 elements. He forced his katana to change, twisting and pulling, until he was holding a gleaming black arrow. Wind. He focused the green energy within the arrow. A hiss rose. Lightning. The blue light shone, barely able to stay in one place. There was the smell of ozone in the air, and a crackling sound. He knocked the arrow, feeling his fingertips bleed from the strain. Karen leaped away, releasing the dome. The point of blinding light left his bow with a hiss. Karen closed her eyes. She had only seen him use this jutsu once before, and it had left an unpleasant spot in her vision. From the amount of chakra they were throwing around, everything was as clear as if she were seeing it, anyway. The arrow pierced the dome, and Fu's stomach as well. Karen hastily erected a stone wall, and Naruto hid behind it as well. The arrow detonated. It turned into a shower of blue sparks that folded inwards. A miniature dome of blue and green energy roared, then exploded, expanding vertically. The sphere of rocks Fu had still been trapped inside went up with it, where it exploded a second time, raining thunder and destructive wind blades down the plateau. Karen knew no normal shinobi would likely survive this combination attack, unless they had a trump card. Unfortunately, Fu had this exact sort of thing. I still feel her chakra, Karen said, starting to panic. She had taken this jutsu head-on, and was still alive. Yeah. Naruto gritted out. I kinda expected this. She will probably transform again. The exact moment he said this, a wave of noxious orange and green chakra turned the sky dark. Fu was hovering in midair, insect wings buzzing angrily. A cloak of chakra bubbled around her, 5 more tails twisting and turning. She was covered in wounds, but they were closing already. Now you made me angry. She inhaled. A ball of scale powder, covered in the same red chakra bursts out of her mouth. Naruto and Karen both jumped. Behind them, the wide plateau they had been standing on exploded. Naruto, only reaching the apex of his jump, realized that Fu was not anywhere to be seen. He closed his eyes, trusting his chakra senses. She's going for Karen. He panicked. Karen was strong, but this was a transformed Jinchuriki. And... ah, shit. He might need to use some of the Nine Tails chakra himself. He created a shadow clone in the air. The clone caught his feet, helping him stabilize himself. Naruto gathered wind and lightning chakra in his feet, as fast as he could, before he pushed off at full speed, dispelling the clone. While he was streaking through the skies, he unsealed a short-range weapon. He was not even sure which one that was, he just needed any. He smashed into Fu, halting her charge toward Karen at the last moment. But Fu had seen him coming. She caught his staff between both hands, and held it there, her Biju-enhanced strength preventing Naruto from getting it free. The corrosive chakra ate through the staff in a matter of seconds. My staff. This one had been given to him by Sarutobi, long ago. It was something he had used so often it felt like an extension of his body. And it had just crumbled away. Like that. That was also a good enough reason to avoid getting touched by Fu in this state. He created 2 blades of wind, and hurled them at Fu while he leaped backwards. It smashed harmlessly against her powerful shield, but it gave Karen enough time to get her feet back on the ground again. She was cycling a lot of chakra. Meanwhile, Naruto's lightning-enhanced kick just tilted Fu's head back, while she laughed. His boot melted away. Earth release, Fisher. Karen exclaimed. A huge chasm opened, starting from Karen's position, extending in a line until it broke open the ground under Fu. She fell for a single second, before opening her wings, which allowed her to glide. That was enough for Naruto to attempt something else. He closed the distance between Fu and himself, right hand extended. Raijin, on his right collarbone, burned. Lightning. Divine streak. It was as unrefined a technique as it went, something he had designed as a close-range attack. Lightning focused in his right arm. It could not even qualify as a jutsu. Naruto fired a stream of golden and blue lightning from his right hand, burning through most of his upper body clothing in seconds, and leaving his hand shaking. Fu actually had to shield herself with her chitin, this time. She let out a roar, as she began to transform further. Her skin burned, blood and chakra coalescing to form a living armor around her. Naruto. Jump. He heard Karen say, over the drum of his own heartbeat. He did. She slammed the rift shut. It won't hold her. He shouted. I know. We don't have much time. If we let her transform, it's over. Naruto nodded, reaching inwards to the pool of the Nine Tails energy. Before he could do anything with it, the ground exploded. He saw it in slow motion. Scale powder burst into every direction. Thin, razor-like pieces of dust. Karen had no time to react. Her clothes and her body were shredded in what seemed like 100 places, and she fell forward. Karen! He screamed. Karen felt herself tilt forward, suddenly sapped of her strength. Blood was pumping out of her pretty fast. Must have nicked a vein. She tried to examine herself for injuries, by doing a body scan. A puddle started to form under her. Her pants were turning red, and so was the shirt she was wearing under her armor. There was no way she could apply pressure, there were just too many wounds. Even adrenaline was not enough to let her move. A wave of dizziness and nausea hit her. She wanted to puke. She wanted to sleep. Or just make the pain stop. It felt as though she had been awake for days. She was tired. So tired. So tired. Her vision got blurry and her ears started to ring. She had to strain just to stay awake. It would be so easy to close her eyes. Just a second. Maybe not even that. Naruto. Naruto was still fighting. Like a demon. A blade in each hand, wind coursing through his left arm, lightning in his right. With one hand he deflected, with the other he parried, pushed back. Fu's attacks with her blade wingtails broke his swords every time they hit. He never relented, just summoning one more each time it happened. He roared. And he was keeping up, somehow. He got injured several times, but never cut too deeply. No matter the amount of chakra he burned just to stay on his feet, it didn't seem to slow him down or make him hesitate. And somehow, the Jinchuriki woman could not finish him. He kept attacking, never giving her enough time to prepare an attack strong enough to kill him. His chakra was agitated, screaming almost. Whether it was in pleasure, pain, or anger, Karen could not say. Despite all that, he seemed clear-headed. That was not Fu's case. Fu was not as determined. Her frustration was costing her attacks less and less precise with every passing second. And her emotions were confused. Maybe she was afraid. Looking at Naruto's eyes, it was not hard to see why. He seemed like a man possessed, lost in the battle, his purple eyes almost glowing. And was she dreaming, or was there a faint violet sheen to his body? Something was building up inside of him. Some of his carved seals were gleaming. Was he trying to use the Nine Tails chakra? Something within her told her it was a mistake. That he would burn himself from the inside. Just for a win against this mad woman? No. This wouldn't do at all. She had promised herself not to be a burden to anyone. It was time to prove to herself that she could help them, too. With an effort that left her even more dizzy, she brought her wrist to her mouth. She bit hard. In this moment, Naruto felt no fear. Even though he knew he should be afraid. There was no pain, even though he knew he was injured. Everything had slowed down. Either his mind was entirely clear, or he had completely lost it, Fu's attacks seemed to become slower. Or at least, she could not reach him anymore. In shinobi battles, usually, there was a rhythm. A pulse. Something unspoken that went beyond simple fighting. Maybe this was a form of understanding. When Fu broke one of his swords with a kick, he knew she was about to strike with her third wingtail. When he cut a wound into her leg, he could almost see how lonely she had been, growing up in Taki. When her claw reached his chest, cutting a burning wound into it, a blade made out of lightning crashed against her face. He knew he would not win this. Not without the Nine Tails chakra. Naruto was almost reaching for it, but some hesitation still held him back. It felt as though he would be doing something permanent to himself, if he did. Left foot. Right hand. Second tail. Weave. Claw. Deflect. His own chakra was starting to dwindle. Keeping both lightning and wind harmonious enough not to fry him was taxing. Especially after a long day. Naruto found he didn't care. He ducked, narrowly avoiding another burst of scale. His wind blade cut a cleft into Fu's chin. She was reaching for more power. Like a cornered animal. She had never gotten formal training, this much was obvious. How much stronger would she be, if she had? He didn't want to think about it. Another chakra flared up. Karen. That was Karen. How she was standing again, he wasn't sure, either. Fu started to shift into something bigger, stronger. Something he stood no chance against. Karen stared at him. Something passed between them, close to understanding. She extended her hand, wincing. He knew this was not something she had mastered yet. It would have to be enough. Chains burst from her hand, wrapping around the transforming beast. It looked around in confusion, its chakra weakened for an instant. It wouldn't last. Except for the glowing red seal on its back. That one was still burning. Naruto weaved hand signs. He dashed forward, in a last effort, ethereal flames on his fingertips. The beast that was also Fu looked on in horror as he slammed his hand into its back, almost digging into the armored skin. 5 Elements Seal. The effect of the jutsu Orochimaru had taught him was immediate. The armor disappeared, and Fu returned to her normal state, wrapped in golden chains that dissipated almost right away, as Karen fell on her knees. My chakra. No, Kome. Where are you? Kome. Fu started to panic. For the first time in her life, she was entirely alone. The presence she had always felt in the back of her mind was gone. She was sitting on her ass, looking as lost as a lamb. Naruto approached her, yet another blade in his hand. That would be his second murder. Another Jinchuriki. Another one that had been like him. What kind of person did that make him? You're going to kill me? Fu asked, eyes empty. She had likely done the exact same thing to so many people. Yes. Do it then. She accepted her fate, as though she had always known that it would happen. His blade rested against her jugular. Karen looked on, unreadable. It would be so easy. Fu had no access to her tailed beast. No healing. No armor. Just a single move, and he'd remove a thorn in everyone's spine. There was nobody who cared about Fu. Nobody. A single strike. It would be painless, too. He had felt her emotions, he knew what kind of hell she was living in. Killing her would be a relief. He should kill her. He really should. She would be no end of trouble in the future. She would kill again, this much was obvious. He saw the lonely girl, crying when nobody was looking. Naruto sighed. He let his blade fade away. What are you doing? Leave. What? I'm not going to be responsible for risking a war with Taki and its allies. He let out another sigh. Leave. Are you stupid? I must be, yes. Get out of here. Fu looked at him. She then cackled. She laughed louder, and louder, a shrill sound full of conflicted emotions he didn't care to try to understand. Then she stopped abruptly. She lifted strangely lucid orange eyes toward him. What do you think you're doing, exactly? Think you won? 2 against 1. Do you think this proves anything? That you're better than me for showing mercy. Nothing. You won nothing. Naruto said nothing. Nobody gave me any sort of real training. Out of all 9, I am the weakest. Alone, even there. He just stared at her. Somehow that made her even angrier. Say something. Somehow, Naruto had known. But even a victory against the weakest of the Jinchuriki was a victory against a Jinchuriki. He ignored her again. She clenched her fists, hot angry tears rolling down her face. You're. How dare you humiliate me like this? Both of you. We're shinobi. Karen said, her exhaustion apparent. Fuck you. I will make you both regret this. I will dash. Naruto turned cold purple eyes on her. If you come for me or my friends again, make no mistake. There won't be any second chances. There won't be any mercy like today. He gripped his sword so tight his hand started to drip blood. Come after me, or anybody I hold dear. And I will end you. It was her turn to stay silent, shaking in anger. She gave them a last look full of burning emotions. She spat on the ground before leaving, dropping to the ground instead of flying. Naruto made sure to wait until her chakra was gone. He then dropped on his ass, letting out the most relieved sigh of his life. She really is gone. Karen confirmed, dragging herself next to him. Seems so. Damn it. And this day started out so nice. He laughed. Then he started to cough. I hope Sakura is doing better than us, at least. Can't be much worse. I'll drop a mark here. He proceeded to do just that. We can continue tomorrow. I'm not staying here any longer. As soon as Sakura comes, I'm bringing us back home. Karen nodded, before she fell asleep. Sakura arrived soon after. She saw the ruined plateaus, and the fact that they were still far away from their destination. Rough day, I take it. Naruto snorted. You can say that again. He grabbed both of them and they left in a flash of thunder. Chapter 39, Realizations. Apparently, Naruto had nothing in his arsenal that could hurt a transformed Jinchuriki. He had always had more interest in what he could actually do with chakra, otherwise relying more on his superior speed, strength, and elemental enhancements to keep ahead of his enemies. And to be fair, it had mostly worked out, overall. But when dealing with the strongest shinobi around, there would be people as durable as few. Some, even more. There would be people faster than him. There would be people stronger than him. Naruto had known this, of course. But seeing it was a different thing altogether. He had a fair amount of battle experience, but this had been his first real fight in how many years? He wasn't sure, honestly, but his birthday had passed a little while ago. He was 18 on the paper, physically and mentally. It always got so confusing, trying to keep track of this. What did people even do, when they lacked firepower? His late father had apparently created the Rasengan, but Naruto knew it would not do much against a transformed Jinchuriki. Orochimaru had his Sage Mode, but Naruto would rather not sign a contract with the snakes, as it came with a few too many conditions that he would rather not abide by. The Nine-Tails Chakra. Instinct told him it would be a real last resort option. As in, something that might well kill him. His most destructive technique at the moment might be his ability to use two elements together. There were a variety of jutsu he could modify to work that way, he thought. The looming threat of having to fight real monsters drove him forward. The three of them were still on a mission technically, so the morning after, he went back with Sakura to put the second out of 3 permanent marks in the land of hot water, before splitting up once more. Karen was recovering, in the meantime. Naruto put on a permanent mark near the north of the land of canyons, erasing the temporary one they had left yesterday. Then he jumped to the skies, a blur of blue light bouncing toward the land of Earth. Once he was close enough to IWA, he slowed down, sticking to flying as an eagle, before he glided down. Then he walked, almost casually, making sure not to be seen as a threat. Because they likely had some sort of scouts, sensors. He put down a permanent mark a few kilometers away, making sure it wasn't noticeable. Sakura joined him, and they went to complete their job in the land of hot water. Night had already fallen. Tomorrow he'd have to go back to mark the north of the land of Earth. The rest could wait, according to Orochimaru. His next priority, and Karen's by extent, would be getting to Konoha. Naruto wasn't entirely sure of how he felt about that. He was currently walking with Sakura, headed toward the easternmost port of the Land of Hot Water, where she would have to take a boat toward the Land of Water. "Did you miss it?" Naruto asked. "What do you mean?" "Being on a boat." She snorted. "Not really, last time was enough for me." "Well, at least, I can take it." "You're just talking shit, now." "I got better." "Well, I've heard the Eastern Sea was a fair bit rougher than the northern part, so." She shrugged. "Might not be so good for you." "Yeah. I mean, we don't need two people on the boat, right?" He let out weakly. She clicked her tongue, amused. "No, I will be enough." "Be careful, all right?" he asked. "Of course. Worst case, I can just retreat to UMI, now." That was true, but as he had figured when fighting Fu, there were some limits to the ability, mainly the time of uninterrupted focus it took. In times of danger, 10 seconds was too much. He let out a weak smile. "Yeah. I guess." She laughed, taking him into an embrace. She was so much shorter than him, now, he noticed. "I'll be fine, promise." "Who else will bully you and keep your ego in check, otherwise?" She grinned sharply at him. "I'm sure you'd still find a way," he said wryly. He still took her into a closer embrace. "Midget," he whispered in her ear. "Asshole," she murmured back. They smiled at each other. He watched her boat depart from the harbor. He covered the northern part of the land of Earth over the next 2 days. Despite how boring it was doing it alone, he was free to run at full speed the whole time, and the only breaks he took were for eating. He called it a day, and jumped back home, passing through the main gate. Naruto hadn't heard from Sakura since she had left, which was not surprising, considering that she was on a boat. Still, he was a bit worried. The village was growing at a fast pace, which surprised him, even though he had been the one to allow every settler to come here in the first place. There were around 40 people living on the islands by now, as they had marked a few more in gatherings similar to the first one they had in Hiraji. Which meant around 25 houses on the central island, and some very quick-growing rice fields and sweet potato crops on another one. Somebody was herding young calves and chickens, according to what Naruto had heard. Tomorrow, he and Orochimaru would mark more people. To help the proceedings, the man had taught him how to affix the mark on people by himself, which should help, should he recruit more on the way. Damn, but Orochimaru really believes people ready to leave their countries grow on trees. "Hey, I'm back," he called, entirely casual after his 3 days' absence. Karen's apple red head popped through a window on the first floor. "Where have you been?" she asked, looking pretty worried. Still, she jumped from the ingawa, landing gracefully on top of the sand. He noticed she was wearing her training garb, and was covered in sweat. "Oh, you've been training, I see." He smiled, happy she had recovered some. "Humph. Only lightly, I'm still not good enough to go." "Don't ignore my question, though." She puffed her cheeks, making him want to pinch them. "Were you worried?" he asked, lightly pulling on her cheek. "Why would I be worried about you?" She countered, but she was looking away. "You so were." He laughed, picking her up easily by her waist. "Put me down." "God, you're such a child," she said, but she was grinning, too, her cheeks red. "Oh, am I?" he asked, his voice low, but playful. Karen inhaled a sharp breath, flustered. "Yes. Absolutely. Would a child?" he started. She saw in his eyes what he intended to do. "Don't you dare throw me in dash." "Do Tiwo." He almost managed to throw her in the lake, but she wrapped her legs around his waist, tipping both of them forward. They fell in the sand, laughing. "Whyy?" Karen whined. "Why did you have to do this?" "You provoked me, obviously. I couldn't let that go." he said, trying to muster some dignity. Oh no. She panted. When did she get so close? They were laying in the sand, his body pressed flush against hers. Karen didn't shy away from it, the opposite even. Her hands rested around his shoulders, caressing his neck. She was looking at him with a look he had seen before. She was looking at him as if. It hit him like a brick wall. I'm so stupid. How could I not see it before? Maybe he had not wanted to see it, preferring to believe they were just close friends. But then again, maybe close friends didn't sleep together in the nude. Maybe close friends didn't have the kind of slip UPS they had. Maybe he could blame the seals somewhat. Then again, they never made you feel in a way that wasn't there from the beginning. Karen was attracted to him, at the very least. He wanted to slap his own forehead. And from the way she had acted around him, she might well have developed some romantic feelings as well. Ah. That might complicate things a bit. What did he feel toward Karen? He realized he had never tried to put a name on it. Or maybe he just was bad at understanding his own feelings, when it came to romantic ones. His relationship with Taewya had been simple. They were casual friends who played music together, and had sex sometimes. Simple enough. It was something he knew they would likely resume whenever she joined them on the island. Ino. He had figured it out at the time. Which he now realized might have been a mistake. Sakura. Same thing. He had deluded himself into thinking being attracted to her had just been a passing thing. Now, Karen. She was the one he had been around the most in the recent years. He cared for her, a whole lot. And he definitely was attracted to her, he could finally admit. But this wasn't something that was as clear-cut as it had been with Taewya. You couldn't just start fucking your friends like that and expect that nothing would change. That was common wisdom for a reason, and even Anko had made sure to stress it, when he had asked her for help. And he definitely wasn't looking for commitment. Some part of him, the one that had grown starved for maternal affection, was simply too afraid to get this kind of intimacy, with a single person. There were just too many ways it could go wrong, especially in his case. He had never vocalized it, but he had known that his desire to see everything as simple friendship had come from somewhere. If it hadn't been for this. Damn. He knew Karen could have been it. She seemed to notice he was lost in his thoughts. Hey, are you okay? Karen asked. You seem thoughtful. He hesitated. How did you even start a conversation like this? Yes. She wondered. Karen, what do you think of me? What I think of you? She inhaled sharply, cheeks flushed. I care about you. God. He was such a coward. Why was he putting her into such a position? No. Scratch that. What? Naruto took a breath. It's unfair of me to ask this. Do you want to know what I think of you? He said instead, taking the bull by the horns. She seemed even more taken aback. Yes. Yes, I would love to, Naruto. She said quietly. Look. Karen. He grabbed her by the hand, bringing both of them to a seated position. She was hanging onto his lips. His own felt very dry as he continued. You are a beautiful, kind, strong woman. Her mouth hung open a bit, and her eyes were wide. You're smart, you're talented, you're... Shit, I admire you, really. You, really. She said with a small voice. I do. He nodded. And I am really, really attracted to you. The cat was out of the bag, now. He felt a bit vulnerable, but it turned out to have been way harder, scarier in his own head. Damn, she actually gasped. And unless I really misread things. I know you are attracted to me, too. She didn't bother denying it, just nodding once. I'll skip you the whole speech about us not ruining our friendship, since I now know I care for you in a way that's not just friendly. Hell, if I felt this way for Sasuke, I think I would have noticed way early. He was losing direction. She was smiling, though. But she also looked pretty worried. I lost track. Here's the thing. As things stand now, I can't offer anyone a committed relationship. Not you, not anyone. I know how unfair that is. I'm putting you in enough danger as is, now. There are people out to kill me, and I can't afford to drag you into this mess even more. They will use you, and then they will kill you as well. I'm afraid of what looms on the horizon. And I'm afraid of real intimacy. Of commitment to one person. I don't think I can do that. He was surprised it even came out so honestly out of him. And the worst part is that I know I'm being a hypocrite here. Even knowing all of the things I just said to you. Even though you are my closest friend. I would not have been strong enough to reject you if you had tried anything direct during all these nights we slept together or the times we slipped up. He gave her a guilty smile. And now, either. I'm afraid that if anything like this happens again, I will accept. But even then, I still can't give you much more. It won't be the kind of relationship I expect most people to have in mind, when they think of the word. Probably never will be. He stood up, pulling her with his hand, and then let out a sigh. With that being said, I care deeply about you. No matter what happens, this much won't change. And I'll always be with you. He grinned at her, and she did too, after some hesitation. Naruto left toward the house. Karen said nothing. She just stared at the lake, thinking. Well, this could have been worse, Naruto thought. He did feel like the world's shittiest friend, but the way he saw it. Honesty always beat deception, when it came to the people you cared about. Even if it could hurt them. Naruto had had enough lies in his life, he felt. There was no good reason for him to continue with the cycle. Lying to enemies was another thing entirely, but he would avoid it with the people he cared for. He joined Orochimaru near his spire, which was looking even more imposing up close. He did wonder how Haiden was faring, and together they left to pick up more people in hot water. When they came back, late at night, with 30 more people in tow, Karen was already fast asleep. Tomorrow, he'd have to go to Konoha. Naruto left very early in the morning, as this might turn out to be a long day. Scratch this, he knew it would be a long day. The closest gate he could leap to was in the south of the land of rice, so he started his journey there. Leaping high in the sky, wrapped in wind and lightning, was second nature by now, something that came to him without any real effort. People close by would notice, no doubt, but they wouldn't try to stop him, if they even could. It was a practiced routine. He would jump around at extremely high speeds until he got close to a city, where he would transform into a bird and glide down slowly. Then he'd put a mark. Once he was far enough from the city, he would start again. He tried to see it as a form of training, building stamina, chakra reserves, and learning how to avoid tunnel vision. And he was learning how to be more efficient, be it in ways of maximizing his speed, or his use of chakra. The downside was that he didn't see much of the cities, or even the landscapes, sometimes. But he'd have all the time in the world once he was done with this. He had passed some statues of the first Hokage and Uchiha Madara earlier on. Strange. Naruto was starting to recognize some of the forests, if that was even possible. He was getting close. In about 2 hours, he'd be in Konoha, likely. He was feeling his heart pounding, and he knew it was not just from blitzing around for the entire morning. When noon came, he was gliding down as an eagle, high up in the sky. 7 hours, or so. Not bad, considering the same trip would likely have taken 3 to 4 times as long for most experienced shinobi. Naruto dropped, 5 to 10 kilometers away from the village, close to a small waterfall, putting a permanent mark here. He might have been able to come closer, but he knew Konoha had a permanent sensor team securing the area, which included Hayagatu. His marks were supposed to be almost invisible, but he was not about to tempt the devil. Well, he was covered in sweat. Orochimaru had mentioned something about setting the right impression, giving him a white coat, a pair of pants and some unnecessary jewelry. He sighed and undressed, going down into the water. Less than an hour later, the man named Indra entered the village hidden in the leaf. Chapter 40, The Village Hidden in the Leaf. Maybe 5 years was simply not enough time for things to change much. That's what Naruto thought as he entered through the main gate, simply offering one of the scrolls Orochimaru had given him as proof of identification. The Sannin's name apparently carried even more weight here than Naruto had thought. Just like that, he was back in the place in which he had grown up. It felt pretty nostalgic, he had to admit. High on the rocky cliff, the 5 faces of the cage looked toward the village. In front of it, the red tower stood proudly, the highest building in town. Merchants came in and out of the village, no, the city with carts dragged by horses, mules, or people. Just like it always had in his life, business in Konoha was booming. People seemed at ease, for the most part. But Naruto had grown here. He could feel the undercurrent of tension in the air, even without his slight ability to feel people's negative emotions. Still, it confirmed what he was thinking already. He walked leisurely toward the tower. In truth, he was looking around, part of him hoping to recognize a familiar face. Konoha was a big place, though, so he had no luck here. There was still this sense of familiarity that he felt toward the village, but that was it. No longing, no desire to stay here longer than he needed to. Once in the tower, saying he was sent here to deliver a message from Orochimaru of the Sannin got him a meeting with the Hokage in less than an hour. The process was fairly different as a non-Konoha ninja, as there were a few security screenings, in which he also had to relinquish all weapons he was carrying on himself. Not that it mattered a lot, when he could just summon more with a thought. A man he was fairly sure was a Yamanaka behind his Umbu mask took a brief scan of his surface thoughts with a glance. That's pretty thorough. Invasive, even. Either things had always been like this, or something had the Hokage on guard. He was led into the man's office. He bowed politely, as this was the leader of the strongest village in the world. The last 5 years must have been rough on Sasuke's father, Naruto thought. Dark wrinkles lined his eyes, and there were a few gray hairs in what had been the typical Uchiha jet black last time he had seen him. Indra, then. The Hokage said, his thoughts about the young man wearing the Uchiha's infamous ancestor carefully veiled. Naruto despised the man he had seen in his visions, of this, there was no doubt. He had never been great at deception, though, which was something he admitted pretty openly, by now. This was the only name that really came to him naturally, for reasons he did not like to dwell on. Yes. He nodded, simply. No family name. None, Hokage-sama. The man raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes slowing on his whisker marks. Naruto understood. This is something that I apparently got from my parents. He said, tracing them, with some dark amusement. I never got to meet them in person, though. This was true, if you discounted meeting his father's chakra imprint. The Hokage seemed to nod in acknowledgement. There were 2 men, hailing from Kumo, who bore similar markings. They were marked by the Nine Tails chakra, long ago. Maybe you descend from them, then. Maybe. Naruto nodded. Better to let the man assume these things. You said you were bearing a scroll from Orochimaru? Fugaku asked. Yes, Hokage-sama. May I see it? Certainly. He handed him the scroll. Fugaku opened it, eyes bleeding red as he read through it. Several emotions passed on his face, so carefully hidden that Naruto only noticed because of how familiar he was with Sasuke's own poker face when he managed to remember how it worked. The Hokage then sighed. That man, he smiled a tired smile. He's never going to stop giving me headaches, this teacher of yours, then. I assume not, Hokage-sama. The smile turned somewhat amused. Are you familiar with the contents of the missive? Not at all. He just instructed me to deliver it to you. Yes, I thought so. The Hokage tapped his finger on the desk, ordering his Umbu to leave the room. He wanted complete privacy, then. Just between you and me, then. The Hokage smiled thinly. You should probably know that in his message, he declares you as the sole leader of Omegakure, a village set in the international waters, that does not depend on any state's jurisdiction. What? Naruto exclaimed. Fugaku laughed, a short bark, and Naruto realized he had never heard Sasuke's father laugh before. Not even the few times he and Toru had brought him to the compound. He continued. I assumed as much. Well, he listed himself, Mitarashi Anko, Uzumaki Karen and Harano Sakura. He paused on her name, before shrugging. She did not have any obligation to her village, having been relieved of her position years ago. And he declared you, as well the two latter, citizens of Omegakure, too. Him and Mitarashi Anko as partial-time residents, only. Naruto fumed inward. That's such an Orochimaru move. Don't say much, let the others deal with the fallout. Worst part being that he knew the man would have told him the contents of the scroll, if he had only asked. Naruto sighed. The Hokage continued, seriously. He has told me about Akatsuki. Naruto kept quiet, he didn't know how much the man knew. That they are apparently after the Baijuya. We lost a promising young shinobi to them, years ago. The Hokage looked away, wistful. Naruto doubled down on his silence. And if my hunch is right, and you are related to the Gold and Silver brothers, they could be interested in your latent abilities. That's an if, though. Naruto nodded. Yes. Fugaku said, curtly. And my youngest son is the host of the One Tail. Isn't this supposed to be a secret? Fugaku snorted. Oh, please. At this point, I don't think there's any village that hasn't heard of Sasuke of the Living Flame. He said in a mix of exasperated fondness and pride. I blame his teacher for this kind of dramatics. Hopefully he didn't pick up on his worst habits, otherwise I think the Hyuga clan might give me even more trouble over the next few years. Naruto filed this information for later, wondering what this was about. The Hokage continued. But I digress. Orochimaru reported that they are very likely based in Rain. However, as things stand, we won't be able to prove anything, unless they start acting more overtly. I assume Orochimaru didn't help you build a whole new village solely to be able to get away with his own worst habits. Ah, the whole human experimenting thing. Naruto said, distaste obvious. The only reason he could tolerate it as long as he didn't hear too much detail about it was because Orochimaru restricted himself to the scum of the scum. Yes, indeed. Fugaku said dryly. You're right. The main reason is that he says Akatsuki's probable leader, Nagato. Fugaku didn't flinch at the name, but one of his hands tightened around his bicep. Is likely going to hunt him down. They already tried something, in fact because they feel he knows too much about them, plus refusing to join their ranks. He refused. Fugaku hadn't known about the invitation. And knowing Orochimaru, he had likely thought about it in depth. He was pleased to hear of it, though. Having to face the Snake Sage in battle was not a very pleasant prospect, no matter how problematic the man was, even on Konoha's side. So he did, yes. Naruto nodded. He knew the man well by now, and it would only have made too much sense for him to join the organization of criminals. That he didn't was a good sign. The main purpose of the village is to recruit allies against Akatsuki as well as give Konoha plausible deniability, then. Fugaku smiled thinly. He knew just how important these kinds of under-the-table operations were, for a ninja village. He kept his mind on the conversation, preferring not to dwell on some necessary, but more, unpalatable organizations within his own village. Danzo was brewing something, he knew it. Of course, it was clear that Orochimaru would probably not disband his latest project once he was done if he could manage with Akatsuki. But Fugaku figured that if the man had decided to turn against the village, he probably had been in a better place to do so in the past. Leaving the man a bigger leash could prove to be a boon in the future, as long as he had his loyalty. Naruto let the Hokage mull it over. The man then spoke. Very well. For obvious reasons, I won't be able to extend an official alliance to you. Orochimaru's continuous affiliation with UMI might already give us enough trouble as is, he sighed. I figured as much. Naruto confirmed. But you must have had a long trip. You are free to stay in the village for a little while, provided you find and take care of your accommodation. Naruto bowed. This is more than I could ask for already, Hokage-sama. Fugaku shrugged. I guess we're on an equal footing. Even though it's mostly due to Orochimaru's meddling. Hokage Dano is more than fine. Very well. Hokage Dano. You may go, if you wish. It is still early, and the village is particularly pleasant in this season. I will do so. I shall send someone to show you around. They will find you, so there's no need to worry about the specifics. And probably make sure to keep him in check, in case. Thank you. Naruto was about to leave. One last thing. The man's eyes met his. He didn't need the Sharingan for them to look piercing. It might seem obvious, but I expect you to be on your best behavior. I don't know how both you and Orochimaru run the village of Umi, but I will ask you to abide by Konoha law. Naruto nodded. Certainly. To anybody who didn't know what to look for, Naruto was wandering the streets aimlessly. As a newcomer to Konoha, this was no surprise. The spring was beautiful, and there were people who came here from afar, just to witness the sakura trees blossom in person. Unfortunately, he wasn't really here for sightseeing. He likely only had a limited amount of time to spend in the village, despite the Hokage's word. His father, the fourth, had told him to find his old safe house. How he was supposed to find it with no more information, he wondered. Hey guys, I was just wondering if you knew where your dead leader used to live before? What, why? Just curiosity, haha. Yeah. Asking was likely not an option. There was no registry he had access to, especially as a foreigner, so this was out as well. If he remembered well, his father had said something about using his sensory abilities. That was what Naruto was currently doing, pulsing it periodically, trying to see if there was something out there that felt similar to his own chakra, or what he remembered of the fourths. In a city such as Konoha, there were many overlapping chakras at any given time. People walking around, ninja running on rooftops, seals being used for a great variety of purposes. Karen was much better at this than he was. Naruto felt a familiar chakra moving extremely fast. He cycled some chakra through his legs, ready to jump away if needed. Still, he felt no bad intention coming from the newcomer. The person landed behind him. It was a man, Naruto knew. He spoke. His voice was deeper, but the cadence was still the same. Ah. And here I had hoped it would be a cute girl. Naruto closed his eyes in consternation. Out of all available ninja in town, did the Hokage really have to send this particular one? My name is Uchiha Toru, and I'll be your guide. You can just call me Toru-senpai. He could almost feel his grin. Toru was having a pretty decent day, overall. The last hunting corps mission he had gone on had paid pretty well, so he had decided to take the entire week off. This had been the first time in more than 2 years, so he felt he deserved it. The constant back and forth between training one-on-one with Kakashi, looking for clues about the latest person the Leaf or the military police wanted him to catch, finding/killing the same person before going for more training. Well, it could get exhausting. Shisui and Itachi never seemed to complain about this kind of things, at least not when he was around, but then again, he sometimes had trouble seeing things the way they did. Oh, he was a good little dog when he needed to be, for sure. But there was more to life than just duty. And yet, it felt as though his service to the village was taking up most of his life. For God's sake, he might need a hobby. Sporadic bursts of hedonism were all fine and all, but he felt as though he was stuck in a rut that no amount of casual dating could fill. Get stronger. Gain more recognition. Get rid of Konoha's enemies. Get your own enemies. Have to train to be stronger. Shit, maybe some of the older Uchiha were right. Maybe he needed to find himself a real girlfriend, instead of playing the field. But with the reputation, came the temptation. God, Sasuke really had it good. A cool girl who loved him, a sensei who lived life fully, and took him across the world. No offense to Kakashi, but he too needed a hobby, and he seemed to pick only the most adventurous/dangerous missions, whenever he bothered to come back. Maybe he could find where the two-tailed beast was and seal it within himself. That ought to get Jiraiya interested. Where was Sasuke right now, again? The land of rivers? Was it the land of claws? Probably learning some super secret jutsu that he couldn't tell anybody about, meeting the cutest girls in the land who would undoubtedly fall for the unattainable, committed, romantic, brooding Uchiha. Toru wanted to groan. Damn, maybe Sasuke really had been onto something when he had asked Naruto to seal that Baijuyu into his body. Ah. Naruto. That was somebody that he thought about pretty often. It had gotten less painful over time, but the details burned into his memory thanks to the sherry non. He would never forget his friend's face, when he had been captured, thinking him dead. Even now, he was still carrying his Wakaizashi, even though it constantly drained his chakra. Well, if Kakashi could manage a sherry non, he could surely manage a pesky short sword. Just like the older man, he saw it as his tribute to a friend who had been ready to die for him. And there went his good mood. Well, not really, if he was good at one thing, it was definitely bouncing back. Plus, Fugaku-sama had decided that his day off was the perfect opportunity to have him play ambassador to some guy who had apparently started his own village. Indra. No clan name. His parents really had not given a shit, it seemed. In Uchiha culture, Indra was just a short step short of Madara, when it came to general dickishness. Mostly because it was so much older that people were not even sure about the veracity of the story. Well, they said it in way more words, but they all knew what it meant. Sasuke had told him of the tales written within the Nakano Shrine, once. Toru was not very impressed, he had to say. Kill your friends for more power. Against killing your brother to take his eyes for your own gain. He'd keep his one regular sherry non, thank you very much. So, yeah. He'd show this Indra guy around. Maybe he'd have some nice stories to share. What kind of guy decided to just build their own village? Not a regular one, that was for sure. Found him. He locked in on the man's chakra signature. Not that it was a hard task, far from it, as the guy shone like a beacon to his sherry non. Toru dashed there, appearing silently a few steps behind him. The guy didn't move, but he had definitely noticed him. Toru greeted him, as was custom. Well, the way he used to do things, to be more precise. Fugaku-sama had sent him, so there was no real chance of causing a diplomatic incident by being too casual. Probably. Shit, that came out a bit too casual. Even for him. So, that was Indra, then. Well, Toru had to say that if the man had wanted to look like his namesake, or a powerful foreign leader. He had the part down, despite being around his age. A long, pristine white coat, with sleeves so long that his hands were almost hidden. A golden necklace hung around his neck, and tomo earrings dangled from his ears. Long, thick blonde hair, barely held by a red band that matched his pants. To complete the picture, he of course had to be very muscular. And Toru had to look up to meet his gaze. Purple eyes that seemed to glow, and some peculiar whisker marks on his cheeks. Damn, this guy must be beating girls off with a stick. How unfair. Check the description for the links to the author.